Time travel commencing in T-minus 10 seconds and counting.
It's once again time to go back in time as we head back to the future on the WDW News Today podcast. Let's set our time coordinates for this week's trip through Disney Parks history with Professor Tom Corless.
It's time to go back!
Where, Tom? Where?
Back to the future, Jason! Better understand where the Walt Disney World Resort is heading in the future now without Bob Chapek, thankfully. We have to look back at past attractions, current favorites, and delve into the complete history of these spaces. And tonight we'll celebrate 40 years of EPCOT and 40 years of the American Adventure. So prepare for 3 hours of Eric and I quoting the American Adventure. We'll do a full reenactment of Two Brothers. Do you want to put your haymaker?
Jake, we should play that during a commercial. Play the Three Brothers song.
Put your haymaker outfit.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You could be the South.
I don't know what you're talking. Oh, Haymaker was here earlier.
Yeah.
He was here.
Oh,
he
we're
left his
okay.
clothes in the changing room.
He left his clothes on my desk.
I mean, if he was
But
real,
if
that
Huey
would
Lewis
probably
is
still
coming
be
to the American
case.
Adventure, I'm in.
Wow. Huey Lewis. He has played at the American Adventure at the American Gardens Theater.
Has he?
Yeah.
Have we documented that?
Oh, it was a long time ago. He hasn't played at Epcot Festival in ages, I think. But anyway, we're getting way off course. So yeah, we're going to celebrate 40 years of the American Adventure at Epcot, and let's start way before the opening of Epcot Center. It was originally designed as a circular pavilion standing on legs between Future World and World Showcase. The American Adventure went through many different show formats. The pavilion would have been 2 stories tall, with the American Adventure attraction located on the building's 2nd floor. The positioning of the pavilion between the 2 realms affected its design. Instead of the colonial bricks of the show building we got, this version of the pavilion would have been housed in a then current modernist structure. So this is a weird start. Again, the evolution of Epcot is interesting. It starts as when it's going to be a park, it's 2 parks at one point, right? There's the Walt Disney World Showcase, which is by the Transportation and Ticket Center. Then there's this Future World park, essentially. And then when they push them together, it starts with the American Adventure kind of looks a little bit like the design of the Walt Disney World Showcase, that same modernist look they were going for. And then that was to bridge the gap before someone finally arrived at, hey, shouldn't it be like you see it across the lagoon? And instead, maybe it's a little too much if we're America hosting, and then also like it's very in your face right after you exit Spaceship Earth. Like, there's a lot of discussion and arguing about the placement of the American Adventure and this weird donut building. I don't even know what to call this building necessarily.
It's weird.
We have more images of it, models and art, and we could just roll through those. So that's the Herb Ryman, which eventually you might be saying, like, I've seen that Herb Ryman, that building's not in it. Herbie did another one after that's then the evolution of the park, right, where that building event moves, but you still have that sort of Spaceship Earth that looks kind of like Earth from space, right? There's a top-down look at the layout. The building's a little different in that one. It's not the donut there. It's kind of this X-shaped building on the way to World Showcase. Obviously, World Showcase also a figure 8. It's pretty different. There's the art, concept art version. There's the model.
There you go. That's a good look at it.
Yeah. And then there's, we'll hold on that one for a minute. But there's the show. That's where you would have entered and then ascended upstairs, which is funny because you still did ascend upstairs when they eventually built the thing. But obviously, a circular building is very different from what was built. So we assume it was still pretty different in the end from what they originally planned, at least. Yeah. No thoughts about this central location.
I mean, it makes sense that it's in the center of World Showcase, and they just my thought is they just pushed the two halves together. They should have just spun the one around, and then it would have worked, right?
Well, they got that weird figure 8 thing going on
That is
there,
a weird
which,
thing,
yeah.
too. I mean, the figure 8 thing is almost like there was an island in the middle of the World Showcase, and they just connected it. Like
Yeah.
That actually maybe wouldn't have been a bad idea for the design of World Showcase to be able to cut across like that.
There is a sinkhole to contend with, though, isn't there?
I mean, there's sinkholes all over the place.
But I mean, wasn't that the design of World Showcase is at least in part influenced by some geological
not
issues?
on?
Jake, people are saying my mic's not working. Okay,
They're working.
cool.
They're working on it.
Of course they are. All right. Yeah, I'm on number 4. I think I took my normal one. What is Eric drinking?
I'm drinking Modelo in honor of America.
In honor of America.
I think ultimately they made good choices with where the pavilion is and what they did with it.
I think it makes more sense that it matched the rest, right? That everyone had that. I hate to say stereotypical, but what each pavilion is what you think of when you think of that country, right?
Right.
You know, I think of the Eiffel Tower and these tight Parisian streets when I think of France, right? I think of the pagodas and such, and castles and temples when I think of Japan. And so the big colonial style building for the American Adventure, I think it makes
It totally makes sense.
It absolutely makes sense. Actually, so the one thing I don't like about the American Adventure Pavilion is actually the America Gardens Theater. I mean,
I love that theater.
I love the theater. I hate the location of it.
Why do we love that theater? Because it's the worst theater.
Spencer was crying about how there's trees in it, how stupid that is. I was like, there's shade.
Well,
You're in the heat in Florida.
Oh, hold on a second. Let's talk about when it opened. There was no shade. There was no backstage.
It took a while to grow
You could see across the lagoon.
It was an open stage.
From the stage. It was an open stage. And they're like, oh, we need facilities. And oh, we need shade. And then they were like, well, we'll build shade up to the middle. But we're not going all the way up, even though it's Central Florida. And also, instead of building a shade structure, let's put trees in the view. That's the shade answer.
I like it.
I've never liked
There's
it.
at no point am I like, man, I can't see.
I would knock down that theater and start over.
I think so.
Well, Harmonious tried.
Well, here's a great idea. What if you rebuilt the theater so that it was indoors and air conditioned, and on the second floor you put a huge festival center dessert party space where you could watch Not Harmonious.
And you want that in World Showcase.
It's on the second floor. It's not going to block anybody's view like something.
But you wouldn't be able to see the American Adventure.
You can't now because the theater's there.
Yeah, I guess so. They see the top.
Look, they had to make a choice where they're like, how can we make a theater here that also blends somehow into the aesthetic of the land?
It does blend well.
And
I will give it that.
I
It
think
blends
the
well.
natural environment is a good choice. Like, look, yeah, it'd be nice to have a roof, but at the same time, that wouldn't necessarily be congruent with the rest of the showcase there.
Yeah. If you can't see across the lagoon, maybe they should just build a new theater in one of the expansion pads in World Showcase. That way, it's just kind of out of the way. It doesn't impact, right? Because when there's a concert there, people spill into the path because there's never enough seats for the more popular acts.
Maybe. Here's an idea.
Oh boy.
What if they had this temporary tent-like thing?
You can't fit that many people in World
You can fit a lot of people
Yeah, but
in there.
it goes. The problem is the way it's set
a
up,
weird
right?
shape.
Because the stage is it doesn't, that's a narrow. It's facing the narrow way, right?
Right.
Yeah.
So what if they had a legitimate theater instead of that tent thing?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Use one of those expansion pads wherever.
But
just
they've
build
got the
something
place.
new,
They've got a spot for it. It's great. It would be great right there.
If you can't see across the lagoon, there's no reason for that theater to be there, right? There's no real good reason for that to be there.
No, it's in a bad spot.
Yeah. And you can't even see the boat. They spent all the money on that boat.
What boat?
The ship.
Yeah,
the old ship.
The sailing ship?
I don't even know what you're talking about.
It's right behind.
There's a ship.
Apparently, that
I've
theater
never
blocks
seen
you
it.
from seeing it.
Dome, yeah.
There's a theater and there's a big O-ring. I can't see anything else.
Wow.
There's a ship there.
Wow, that's cool. They have a ship there. I wish I saw it.
All right, the theater's not even built yet where we are in history, so
That's true.
Let's not linger on this. But by 1979, however, Imagineers had decided that keeping America apart from the rest of the countries in World Showcase would seem elitist, and the whole pavilion was moved to the far side of the World Showcase promenade. The American Adventure attraction similarly went through a series of changes. When development began on the attraction, Imagineers knew they wanted to tell the story of America, but not sure how to do that. So 5 different attraction ideas were disregarded before the show's final form was accepted. And over the years of development, 2 different high-powered Hollywood producers pitched concepts, including one that would have had the entire pavilion looking like the top third of the Statue of Liberty. One of the reasons that the idea was recycled into the finale scene of the show that was eventually built.
So one thing to comment about these recycled ideas.
Yeah.
A lot of these recycled ideas made them into the concept for Disney's America,
Yeah.
which was a park that was going to be built in Haymarket, Virginia, before a bunch of people whined and they had to cancel it.
Yeah.
But that was a whole park about America, and so a lot of these ideas for this led directly, and they always say Disney doesn't get rid of any ideas.
Yeah.
So a lot of those ideas led directly to concepts that ended up in Disney's America.
And funny enough, concepts that were drawn up for Disney's America ended up in Disney California Adventure,
Yeah,
right?
that's right.
The amusement pier became Paradise Pier.
Yep.
The hangar became Soarin'. Right? And then the Lewis and Clark Whitewater Raft Ride became Grizzly River Run. So a lot of that, none of that got thrown out essentially, except like We the People was the thing with the Muppets on Ellis Island, and some of that stuff. But a lot of that park ended up getting built one way or another. So it's funny how long that progression goes, and then eventually that stuff gets built in 2001, and people hated it. Nonetheless,
People didn't hate it.
well, Soarin' they liked, the rest.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, quote, one designer decided that the American Adventure should be a happy, fun ride through audio animatronic vignettes of characters singing patriotic American songs as you go through, said Randy Bright. That was Mark Davis, by the way. Our design philosophy at that point in time was to tell something very salient, very germane to the process of what is America, and we didn't think that something that was exclusively couched in music would give the entire picture from that standpoint, so that went away. It was also considered to tell the story using the characters of American folklore like Paul Bunyan. Quote, we cheerfully weeded out where we went down the wrong path. We said it should not be a ride through because you really can't tell important information in a linear fashion that makes sense with a ride through.
But wait, isn't that like most of the other rides in EPCOT?
Yeah, I mean a majority of EPCOT. I think that I know
Both of those rides in EPCOT.
I think it might have been more like Future World. They were like, everything's a ride through the history of something.
Right.
And I think they got the World Showcase and were like, no more rides through the history of something.
Which is fine.
Which is why they were like, well, these are real places that already exist, right? Not a distant future we have to animate. So we did Circle Vision and we did Impressions
Which makes
of France.
perfect sense.
Yeah.
I just don't think the excuse that you can't tell the history of something with a ride through is a legitimate excuse.
No, I think it was more they wanted to switch formats, right?
Absolutely.
They had to do something different.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, no one's saying that here, but that seems more plausible, right? Quote, basically, we began to develop a show that for the most part began not with a concept, but with an idea. And we said, even before we got down to the content, how do we keep this theater alive and moving and full of theatrical surprises for the public? Each thing that occurred tops the last thing that occurs in terms of a method of presentation. So once we got that magic theater down in terms of how we move figures and have film and make dimensional sets and rear projection scenes all working in unison, now we'll deal with what the story is. So in celebrating Epcot's 40th anniversary, we talk about so many technological achievements, right? The first trackless ride. We not only built the first standing geodesic sphere, we put a ride in it. We invented new film technologies, right? And for Impressions de France and all these other things, formats that had never existed. People forget about the American Adventure because it's educational, I think.
Also because you can't see
Yeah.
most of the technology behind
They
it.
don't know what's happening, right? It's a little bit of the Millennium Falcon Smuggler's Run syndrome, right?
Yes.
Where the tech is so good that you don't even know it's happening.
Right.
But they basically sought out, this might actually be the most technologically advanced and ambitious thing of the whole project in the end.
Of Epcot? I mean, other than Spaceship Earth.
Well, the thing is
Spaceship
that,
Earth was kind of easier though, right? Because you're trying to build this thing that doesn't move. Then they're like, no, we want to put in the ground level. We want to, animatronics. Those really complicated robots. What if we put them all in this giant device that slides forward,
Oh, yeah.
raises a scene, but the scene has to raise in synchronization with film, which, by the way, is not digital at this time.
Right.
Like that's insane.
I think also that it's such a good use of technology that people don't know.
Yeah.
Right? People don't think about what's going on. So some of the other stuff in Epcot is like very technology forward. You're like,
Yeah.
okay, they're doing this thing. American Adventure, you don't know. Like, you see characters come up, but you don't think about like, oh, by
How
the
did
way,
they
those
get
are
there?
underneath me right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
I think, but I think Spaceship Earth was a tried and true ride system, right? Just like most of the rest of Future World.
Yeah.
It was just in a pretty ambitious structure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only other thing in Future World that was that ambitious was maybe Universe of Energy.
Yeah.
As a ride system, right? That was a brand new ride
Everything
system.
else is omnivorous.
But their
Everything else is
technology is
omnivorous
visible,
boats.
and that technology is visible and at the forefront for everyone. Where at American Adventure,
It's
you don't
not
even
visible.
think
But
about
see,
it.
there,
It's
there
like
are
it's
a
just
couple.
happening.
There are a couple of moments where you see something you maybe don't know what's going on, right? But number one, Ben Franklin walks up the stairs, right? Like that's ambitious, even if it wasn't on this thing that's moving underneath you, right? But the fact was, they're like, oh, for that thing, that crazy thing we're doing, can Ben Franklin walk up the steps? Yeah. Sure, why not? Let him go up.
I mean, the guy's twirling a rope. That's about the most showy they get with their technology, right?
They didn't stop. There was no like, hey, we already got, like, this is going to be crazy as it is. We may not get this to work. They're like, no, that guy's going to climb those stairs. That guy's got a rope. Frederick Douglass is going to glide by on a boat. Forget it. Just everything's going to, and at the end, the Statue of Liberty's going to come up. Like, it's insane. It's actually insane.
For like 1980?
Yeah.
It's insane. It's unbelievable what they put their minds to and could accomplish in 1980. And honestly, not that I want to get into a rant here, but it's such a different mindset than the parks are now and Imagineering is now. It's sad, actually.
This would never get built now.
In fairness, though, like, I think the saving grace of WDI the last several years is the R&D department. I think research and development, right? And they've done some incredible things. They're IP based in some cases, right?
Yeah.
The lightsaber.
The lightsaber's a good example.
Like, the whole world has been trying to figure out how to make like a real lightsaber for a long time. And then WDI, the R&D guys are just like, hey, I did it. Here you go.
Yeah. Yep.
In contrast, there's like the Project EXO, which I don't think is that interesting. It's like we got a big exoskeleton, which we've seen before. Like, I get it. It's more detailed.
See, that one is almost another case of you don't see what they're doing, right? Because the whole real reason behind that was not so much just, oh, we have these bigger characters that bring to life. It was performer safety, right? So people that played Wreck-It Ralph or whoever had a lot of problems. Like, people get hurt and stuff. So I think the real challenge was we want to continue to do these big characters, but we need to come up with something where these people aren't like getting injured and racking up medical bills we got to pay for. And I think that was more of it than, I think that's why Hulk isn't terribly impressive. Like, it works really well, but I think the impressive part is that the performer's probably completely comfortable and not being injured, right? That's the way it was explained to me. But,
that makes sense.
But I get your point is absolutely valid. It's not terribly impressive to look at, but
No.
yeah.
I mean, Universal's been doing it with Transformers for how long?
That's fair. That's fair. I don't know that those are very impressive either. But
No.
They're not, but
Yeah.
doing something that is essentially the same thing
yeah.
15 years later is not necessarily impressive either,
No.
considering the resources that you have at your
That's fair.
disposal.
That's fair, but the Omni Coaster, like there's been some stuff where I still don't think it's
Omnicoast
this.
is cool, lightsaber's cool.
It's not
Right.
like this where they just went ballistic.
Yeah.
They just decided,
It's
there
not-
are no limits.
What's happening now is great in terms of technological information, innovation.
Yeah.
But it's not like dreaming big, right? Like this American
It's not
Adventure
coming up
show
with the
system-
concept first and then the solution, right?
Right.
They still are doing solution and then the
Shoving a
story,
concept
right?
into it. That's
Which
right.
is working backwards from what WDI is supposed to do.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's also not as ambitious.
No.
Like a giant walk around character is not as ambitious as like a show system based on railroad cars. I
Yeah.
mean, that's,
with dozens of animatronics.
dozens of
and
So for those, I want to explain it for those who don't fully understand what's going on. When you go to the American Adventure, right? You go up the escalator or elevator, whatever, however you get upstairs. The reason you're going up there is because they need to get you above this thing that's beneath you, which is the train. They call it the train, right?
the war wagon.
War wagon train.
it's essentially
Yeah.
train cars, box cars, parallel to next to each other that slide sideways.
Yeah.
And so there's a box car that contains each show scene, and it slides on railroad tracks to bring the show scene that's up next to the stage, and then it raises up. And then it goes back down, and it slides forward, and the next one rises up. And so every show scene is a box car on this train, and they're sliding side, doing it silently, and they're doing it without any vibration because you're sitting in the audience and you would know it.
Yeah.
And they're doing it quickly.
Vibration is the guy next to you snoring.
But they're also doing it very quickly
Yeah.
because they've got to get the show scene down, the car slid over, and the next show scene up literally in 30 seconds.
And some of those sets are giant, right? Like I think about
Yeah.
the exposition,
Yes.
like those sets, and there's animatronics on them, and it's just massive. The World War scene with the ship, they're giant scenes. So it is impressive how quickly they go up and down, considering they were, back here a while ago, and they've moved up, and now they're doing this. And it's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. But onward with Randy Bright's story thus far. Imagineer Randy Bright. Quote, so we decided to create this magic theater to begin with, and then we sat back. He said, now out of this magic theater, we'll begin to fashion the story. Actually, here they kind of worked backwards too. To fashion the story of the 4th century experience, that was the beginning. Imagineers, including Randy Bright, eventually came up with the idea of using a magic theater. Imagineers designed the theater so it'd be able to combine video, audio animatronics, and moving sets to tell the story of America. According to Bright, once Imagineers came up with the idea of the theater, writing the script for the American Adventure was much easier. The story that they came up with involved Benjamin Franklin and Mark Twain, leading guests for the history of the country. Initially, Imagineers wanted to have 3 hosts for the pavilion, one for each century of America's existence. In addition to Franklin, the 18th century representation, and Twain for the 19th century, Imagineers initially wanted to have Will Rogers host the attraction as a representative from the 20th century. After finding out, however, that only 5 out of 150 college students knew who that was, they decided to stick with the original 2 narrators. Quote, 3 of the most eloquent spokesmen in American history, Benjamin Franklin, Mark Twain, and Will Rogers, will lead a cast of performers brought to life through the Disney audio animatronics process of 3-dimensional animation. Their message is one of optimism for the future, that in their time, too, Americans dreamed of a better tomorrow, and that a nation founded in liberty and freedom gives its citizens the opportunity and incentive to build on the great foundations of the past. That was a description of the show from the 1977 Walt Disney Productions annual report.
I just want to throw out an idea. Everybody knows who Ben Franklin is, and everybody knows who Mark Twain is.
Yeah.
I don't understand the Will Rogers choice. I think I'm surprised that they didn't have more people like in case Will Rogers didn't work. Like, what if they couldn't get rights or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So, like, the name that immediately comes to my mind is Walter Cronkite.
Was he too recent in
Probably too
1982, or
recent.
did they just decide, like, well, I guess he wasn't the narrator anyway.
He was
for
still
Spaceship Earth
on
yet,
television,
Yeah.
right? But I think most people, the reason he turned out to be a great narrator for Spaceship Earth is because he was a very respected
Yeah.
and very well-known person who was one of the pinnacles of journalism, right? So, in my mind, I think that would have been a great choice.
I don't know if he would have played well with Franklin and Twain, right? Like, they have a bit of fun, and I don't know.
Well,
I think a little bit of distance helps make those characters a little bit more iconic,
Yeah.
right?
that's very
recency
true.
is-
I mean, I don't know if they had three different narrators for the three different centuries. I don't think they would have had Ben Franklin and Mark Twain like talking together. My sense is that it would have been one and then the next
Yeah.
and then the next. So they wouldn't have had to have Walter Cronkite interact with Franklin and Twain.
I think they would have, because I think the idea was still that it's like this stage presentation, and they all, right? Because
maybe, yeah.
I think that was always the idea.
I think an obvious one might have been Martin Luther King. You know, it would have been. I mean, they probably inclusivity wasn't as important.
Was
when they
America ready for that?
building this.
Also, is the
maybe not in
question.
1982.
Yeah,
but
like I think they pushed that as far as they could at that time. Like I think it's amazing how much they kind of pushed the envelope in '82. Yeah. Like this show tackled a lot of uncomfortable things, right? You got to remember back then the Hall of Presidents did not cover anything uncomfortable other than the fact that Richard Nixon was in it. Right? Like that was the only thing that became uncomfortable eventually. But nothing about the American presidency was as it is today with later,
I've been on it with people who say the opposite. Oh, this gloss is over important parts of American history and all that stuff. Nobody at EPCOT is like coming as close to the American adventure as showing parts of their country that need improvement. Right? It's not like Japan's out there like, oh yeah, and by the way, we committed genocide against millions of Chinese people. They don't. That's not part of the thing, right?
See, but I think
Norway's not like the Vikings
film
raped and pillaged their way around Europe back in the day.
I think the American film does kind of point out that we
have room to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
No, it's the closest. It's absolutely the closest any of those pavilions comes to addressing
the rest
some of their
are all
faults.
travelogues, right? And Meet the World would have been the only other thing that would have been more. And Meet the World, you want to talk about glossing over stuff. Meet the World was the king of glossing over history. Just whole periods of Japanese history did not exist. But also you have to, like in 30 minutes, you had to tell the story of like 300 years, right? I mean, you had to do it in a hurry. So obviously some things are going to be glossed over, but you have the Frederick Douglass, you account for Native Americans and the pain of that situation. I think a lot of that's there. And even in the montage, you allude to a lot of uncomfortable things.
No, I agree. So I know that there are people that are just in a hurry to criticize everything, especially because if it comes across as pro-American or whatever.
Yeah.
Don't lose sight of the vision of EPCOT, which is several of these countries were given an opportunity to put their best foot forward and show people what is good about their culture, what is good about their country.
Norway showed you things that weren't even built yet, those oil rigs.
Yes. Well, that's the thing, too, is most of EPCOT, with the exception of the oil rigs in Norway and in Mexico, there's a lot of modern stuff. Yeah. Most of it is showing very old, iconic versions of it. They're showing old ruins or old, the old temples or
well, every one of those films is like the progression of the country, right? It's like, here's what we are known for in our history and our legacy, and then it's at the end it's always like, surprise, we are a modern country and we have this and this and this.
So come visit us, please.
Like, surprise, Canada is not just wilderness and moose. We have Toronto with the film festival and Cirque du Soleil and all of these things.
Yeah.
Yeah, and China's the same way, right? They show
look at Shanghai,
all these things, but the actual structures showcase it. Probably the newest of all the structures that are used are probably the Eiffel Tower that's shown in a pavilion. Maybe I just went blank on the hotel in
Yeah.
Chateau.
de la Bois Dormant. Yeah, but other than that, I mean, most of these things are old. And
You're not wrong, but that was like the whole fight to how are we going to make all these things fit together, right?
Yeah.
You know. But you're right. I mean, there's not a lot of modern architecture in World Showcase.
No.
Yeah.
But this whole problem that we're talking about now is one of the issues that I think doomed Disney's America. Is that there was a huge concern that Disney would smooth over too much of American history.
Yeah.
To have a theme park that proclaimed to tell the history of America in somewhere close proximity to Washington, D.C., where there are actually real American institutions.
Yeah.
Too many people were concerned that they were going to gloss over and paint over stuff that wasn't comfortable. And so, to some extent, I think they were probably right.
I mean, I don't know. Golden Dreams at DCA had that uncomfortable explosion scene. So.
Well.
I don't know. Sometimes they maybe went a little too far. I don't know.
I'd also just like to point out that we talked about Will Rogers, and only 5 out of 150 college students knew who Will Rogers was.
In 82.
In 82.
Now 0.
Well, now it's 0, but also the chat, people think they're talking about Buck Rogers, Roy Rogers,
Captain Steve Rogers,
and Mr. Rogers.
On a News Tonight episode of American Adventure, Nick accidentally said Roy Rogers. I was like, it's not the guy that had the fast food restaurants. Like, it's a different guy. The reason I think they wanted to pick Will Rogers was, again, that, like,
he was a storyteller,
duality, right? Like, he was very American, but he also, like, had his doubts about some of the American way, right? So that, like, yeah, I love our country, but we're not perfect, right? And I think Mark Twain has a bit of that, too.
Yeah.
You know, but maybe they felt that was a little repetitive, the two of them back to back. I don't know.
I may have invented these bifocals I'm wearing.
I assure you they're not rose-colored, right?
Here you go.
You know?
We started.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
We'll quote this thing all night.
We will eventually get to every line of this track. You got shoes made.
I'm the only person I know that has a shirt with a quote from this show on it.
Yeah.
Which quote do you have? Are you going to ruin Mott's birthday?
No, it's
the Parliament.
Parliament's colonial policy is both arbitrary and unjust.
The same tea that. Never mind.
Hear me now.
The beginning of the American Adventure with Will Rogers as the third host would have featured Rogers, Franklin, and Twain. And their reflection on America's past. So they all would have been together. Ben Franklin, I'm going to read. This is actual script that was written. Do we want to, there's 3 of us and there's 3 of them. Do we want to break up the 3 parts?
Oh, God.
Yeah.
I'll do Ben Franklin. America has been settled by the people of all nations. We are not a narrow tribe of men, no. Our blood is as the flood of the Amazon, made up of 1,000 noble currents all pouring into one. We are not a nation so much as a world. Excuse me, Mr. Twain, Mr. Rogers, I am sure you recognize those inspiring words from Herman Melville. It seems they are going to preamble a new show called The American Adventure. It also seems that we 3 have been asked to be the central figures in the show.
The 3 of us star in a show together?
This is Mark Twain.
I can't do
You want to do it?
Do you want to? I can't do any voice.
The 3 of us star in a show together. I can see it now. I just bet Mr. Rogers would love to step on my lines.
Now look, Mr. Twain, you know that's not true.
Why, Mr. Rogers, you know truth is the most valuable thing I have.
Welcome to I guess that's why you use it so sparingly.
Gentlemen, we are not addressing the issue at hand, the American Adventure.
Frankly, I'm sick and tired of all the grousing about what's wrong with America. We should make it fashionable again to talk about all the things that are right about this country.
I agree. The time has come to make an optimistic statement about America and her people.
Well, sir, not just about the days gone by, but about today's world and tomorrow's too. Don't forget, we passed from the scene a long time ago.
Mr. Rogers, I'm sure that if anyone can offer a new perspective on America's challenges for tomorrow, we can. I may have invented these bifocals I'm wearing, but I assure you they're not rose-colored. Man, that line.
Someone fought to keep that
line.
line.
Had to stay. Don't forget that between the three of us, there's a lot of first-hand experience during the first 2 centuries. We were there.
200 years. That's an awful lot of ground to cover.
We can each take the period we're most familiar with. I should host the show right through the birth of a new nation.
I can cover the growing expansion of the American frontier.
I sort of guess things have been kind of crazy in the 20th century.
Wait till the 21st, Mr. Rogers.
Changes faster than any of us could keep up.
Just look around us. Decaying cities, pollution, crime. I'd rather put my crystal ball in reverse.
Now stop that nonsense. Those good old days that everybody speaks of, they were no utopia either. Mr. Twain, those Mississippi shores you walked as a boy were also walked by slaves. And Mr. Rogers, how about the lawlessness and violence of your glorious West? And in my time, few children lived to be adults. If I may quote you from my own Poor Richard's Almanac, the golden age never was the present age, Mr. Twain. If you want to go back, go right ahead. But from what I've seen, the 20th century has an incredible amount of positive things that are simply taken for granted.
Well said, Mr. Franklin. If we can make those points in our show, we can provide a new perspective on our nation today. Maybe even a new sense of American spirit.
There you go. So
Good job. Jason's an actor.
Little taste of
No,
it.
I'm not.
Little taste. of it.
You couldn't see it. Jason was actually twirling a rope. He had a little lasso.
It was his shoelace. He took his shoelace.
And now we're going to go back into my little backyard neighborhood of Mr. Rogers.
Wow.
I mean, it's weird they called him Mr. Rogers.
They should have brought King Friday on.
Man, that's a show I would go see.
Oh, boy.
Right, the trolley goes by. Meow, meow, meow.
Meow, meow, soldier. What'd you do? Let the Nazi fleet use you for target practice? Meow.
Oh, man. So anyway, Rogers was a huge proponent of the sport of polo, especially during the 20s and 30s, and it was on the polo fields of Hollywood where he met and became friends with Walt Disney before making Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Walt had considered other feature-length film projects, including a production of Rip Van Winkle that would have had a live-action Will Rogers interacting with animated characters. Walt had sent some of his top animators, including Grim Natwick, Art Babbitt, and Bill Tilla, to Rogers' Santa Monica Ranch to sketch him in action. And Walt was also planning on using Rogers in character form in a short cartoon titled Mickey's Polo Team in 1936. Unfortunately, Rogers died tragically in a plane accident in August of 1935, resulting in his character being removed from the short cartoon and any plans for the feature film project shelved.
See, nowadays they would just digitally recreate him and put him in there.
Disney legend Herb Ryman sketched and painted a plethora of concept design artwork featuring Franklin, Twain, and Rogers. Disney legend Blaine Gibson sculpted all 3 spokesmen. For a special exhibit at the Will Rogers Memorial and 8 Gallery Museum in Claremore, Oklahoma, the Disney company lent Gibson's study sculpture of Rogers, and both Ryman and Gibson's work of the American Adventure Trio was utilized in publicity. There you go. There's Blaine with them. For Rogers, the Imagineers cleverly designed an audio animatronics figure that could actually spin a rope after an intensive study of real people doing so. The figure was used as an actual used an actual rope with a lasso loop. The rope is weighted at the knot of the lasso to help it swing out when the rotation of the arm begins. The real trick was to achieve the right speed and movement of the wrist to create the realistic effect. Oh, that is a big super chat. Hukalau, $49.99. Thank you for that incredible performance. Thank you. Again, please donate to toys.wdwnt.com. YouTube's going to take a chunk of that. We want to make sure as much money as possible gets to Toys for Tots. But back to this. Just as with the other characters, great attention to detail was made as to what Rogers wore. The leather chaps that Will Rogers' figure wears were handcrafted by a saddle maker. And talented voice actor Dallas McKinnon was brought in to record the voice of Ben Franklin. And over the decades, he provided many more voices for Disney animated films, including some of the dogs in both Lady and the Tramp and 101 Dalmatians, as for several attractions, including an old prospector safety spiel for Big Thunder Mountain Railroad and Zeke in the Country Bear Jamboree.
Wow.
He also appeared as a live-action performer in such Disney movies as Son of Flubber, The Misadventures of Merlin Jones, Hot Lead and Cold Feet, and The Cat from Outer
Hot Lead?
Space.
Hot
Maybe
lead.
Hot Lead?
Oh, was it Hot Lead?
Hot Lead and Cold Feet. That seems
Yeah,
like
I know.
a cowboy thing.
I didn't know the rest of it. I've never heard of that movie.
And
Hot
the
Lead and
Cat-
Cold Feet. There you go.
Cat
Yeah.
from Outer Space.
Cat from Outer Space I have seen.
I know that one because that got our show in trouble one time because didn't we have the Cat from Outer Space playing on the
Oh, did they?
on that
Wow.
the episode we did
A
of
watch along?
the sci-fi. We had it playing behind and it still got us
Oh.
like in trouble.
Maybe. Oh yeah, that it was the Cat from Outer Space.
Yeah.
You're right. Yeah.
I've got like the show blocked.
Oh no, that's not the Cat from Outer Space.
Was it?
That's a cat that hated people.
Oh, the cat that hated
It's a
people.
Tex Avery
Weren't they
cartoon,
the
yeah.
same cat though?
No, different cats.
Only one had a light up
Don't all
collar.
cats hate people?
Only one had a light up
No,
collar, though.
I petted a cat earlier today. Did not hate people.
Is that the one that lives out front?
No, in front of Katie's house, there was a
But you can
a
join us
friendly
tomorrow
cat.
at the
What's
Orlando
the
Cat
cat's
Cafe.
name? Lola. Lola's very sweet, very kind, very sweet.
Yeah, tune in tomorrow for the
I will
live
be at the
stream
Cat
from
Cafe.
the
I'll be
Orlando
bringing
Cat
back hair
Cafe.
in an effort to murder Jason.
Might just work.
Johnny, we're gonna adopt 40 cats and unleash them in the studio.
We're gonna turn our studio into the Disneyland parking lot.
Anyway.
Look at this super chat.
Swansea Searcher, $20. Fred Rogers was 10 times more influential in my childhood. I totally
Absolutely.
agree
Yeah.
with that.
Yeah.
I mean, I just don't know about Ben Franklin, Mark Twain, and Mr. Rogers. Like putting on the first animatronic that could take off its shoes. He took off his shoes. Mr. Potato had removed its ear. Who cares? Mr. Rogers took off his shoes. John Anderson supplied the voice of Mark Twain. Anderson had a long career as a working actor in both film and television, including 4 different roles in the original Twilight Zone series, as well as performing as President Lincoln 3 times for various projects. Will Rogers Jr., the son of the late Will Rogers, did the voice of his famous father. He looked a good deal like his father, and besides other things, often impersonated his father on stage and in film, like in The Story of Will Rogers in 1952. Quote, one of the most difficult tasks was selecting the characters, said Bright. We chose Ben Franklin because we didn't think anybody would be a more lucid spokesperson for the Revolutionary War period of time than the great father of everything from wit to invention to articulation of the American experience. We thought we could bring humor into this. Ben Franklin had it all wrapped up. The best spokesperson of the 19th century, we looked at a number of people, but ultimately said the one who seemed to be enduring was certainly Mark Twain. I can't tell you what we went through with the 20th century when we said who was going to be the spokesman of the 20th century. In the earlier phases, somebody said Will Rogers, of course. We took that idea to a college class, again, of about 150 students of political science, about 5 of whom knew who he was. So we learned something there, that we better bring somebody more contemporary into that. Huge amount of research and expense had gone into the character of Will Rogers. Pages of his quotes were gathered, reviewed, narrowed down, and finally several quotes were chosen. The Imagineers incorporated the figure into the Great Depression segment instead, but only approximately 40 seconds of Rogers speaking is used in the final show. Quote, the closer we got to today, the more controversial things became. Everybody had their idea of who that person should be, and we probably went through about 300 names, none of which you could probably get 5 people at our table to agree on as the spokesperson of the 20th century. We're just too close to that period of time. If you flash forward to 100 years from now, I think historians would be able to give us a figure to put. Honestly, I think it's funny you said that, but at the same time, I think even today, if they decide to go back in and pick someone from the last century, I still don't think they'd
too
be
soon.
able to pick someone. Yeah,
I think Will
We've had
Rogers is
40
very
years.
quotable. I think he was a good choice.
Yeah, people
had a
didn't
lot of
know. Like people
clever-
knew who the other 2 were, right?
Yeah.
That was the problem.
Yeah, it's too soon. They said 100 years. got 60 to go.
Yeah.
Now, if Bob Chapek were in charge when this was happening, they would have Ben Franklin, and then they would have Nicolas Cage solving mysteries from National Treasure.
The Will Rogers animatronic would have became the Woody marionette.
There you go.
You know, like, come
There you
on.
go.
Howdy, partners. Let me tell you about American history.
Yee howdy. Boy, howdy. Newsman Walter Cronkite was one of the top contenders for the role. Briefly, it was considered using Walt Disney as the spokesman for the 20th century, since he had lived through most of it. However, it was thought to be ghoulish, especially with Walt only gone for about a decade, to have a robotic version of the founder of the company. Imagineer Blaine Gibson has always been adamant that audio animatronics technology remains too crude to truly capture the spirit of Walt. Everyone else, though,
Yeah.
all the presidents are fine, not Walt Disney.
JFK might have worked. No, really.
I have so many jokes
He was
I want to make.
quotable. Yeah, forget the way he died and all the jokes associated with it, and
man.
a number of his shortcomings. But I mean, I think he would have been. He was quotable. He had a lot of good.
And he made it in as one of the 3 audio clips, right? So that's, and I guarantee you, those were like probably the 2 people that most of them agreed on. And so in the end, they were like, why don't we just we'll put JFK and Martin Luther King as quotes at the end, and like that solves the problem, right? Okay. Disney conducted detailed research to make the show as accurate as possible using reference sources such as the Library of Congress, United Press International, the Associated Press, and the Smithsonian. They even accurately duplicated the unusual presidential seal of President Roosevelt and used an actual recording of Roosevelt's voice in the show. They also researched details such as the unique color of gasoline as it existed during the Great Depression. And at the time, the show was the most ambitious multimedia presentation ever envisioned, including 35 audio animatronics characters. Some of the wigs of these figures are made from real human hair. Some of the furniture and scenes are actual antiques. The American Adventure marked the first time that audio animatronics character voices came out of individual speakers, and 24 computers were used to control the show. This is insane.
This is insane. I have an issue with the individual character voices coming out of speakers, because didn't that happen in the Enchanted Tiki Room?
I don't think it did in the original version. That was like that was like the overhaul of just like 20 years ago or so.
All right.
That was
certainly
like,
is the case now.
Because when the roof collapsed at the Tiki Room at Disney, I remember that reopened and everyone on the internet was like, "Oh my God, we have surround sound."
Okay.
Like that was a big deal. I think characters shared speakers.
That's possible. It's possible.
Before that point. I think when we switched to under new management, that's when that happened here. But I think this was probably actually the first time they did that.
I believe it. I believe it. But yeah, no, 24 computers back then. And not only that, how many of those computers were located in Computer Central and Communicore?
Yeah.
Not in the actual building where the attraction is.
Very far away.
Yeah.
And remember, this is not far removed from a couple years prior where they tried to design Space Mountain using computers and couldn't do it, right?
Yeah.
And then instead, just a couple years later, we're only in the development of this, we're only 5-6 years later. Then suddenly they're like, oh, we use 24 computers to control this 35 animatronic show.
Yeah.
Yeah. The technology to produce the American Adventure is one of the most advanced and complex systems ever created for a theme park. Not to mention, by January of 1982, nearly no work had actually begun on show control, lighting, special effects, and show monitoring. The American Adventure team had an arduous task ahead of them, and the most complex system that had yet to be designed was the stage control system. Even by today's standards, the system is so complex. Read a description of the show system direct from one of the creators, From Building a Better Mouse by Steve Alcorn and David Green. Quote, the American Adventure pit is in an area below the stage in which a gigantic steel carriage 60 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 14 feet high rolls from underneath the audience to position 10 hydraulic lifts in the proper spots so that they can ride behind the front lip of the stage, in front of the rear screen that spans the stage. Safety concerns in American Adventure resulted from the way figures were positioned in front of the screen. The figures are extremely heavy, laden with hydraulic and pneumatic hoses, electrical wiring, solenoids, and a rigid metal frame. They're installed on large sets ranging from a plaster rock to a building or a submarine. The entire assembly weighs as much as 60,000 pounds, is raised 14 feet in 10 seconds under hydraulic control by one of 4 computers. And when the pistons and feed valves are energized, the set rises into position in front of the rear projection screen. However, there are far more sets that can possibly fit into the space between the proscenium and the front of the stage and the rear projection screen. So 10 of the sets are mounted on steel carriage, 14 feet high, 30 feet wide, and 60 feet long. This carriage, resembling the framework of a boxcar, rolls in a pit. From underneath the audience, it proceeds to the back of the building, far behind the rear projection screen. It stops at 6 different positions during the show to enable lifts of varying sizes to be raised in the small gap between the back of the stage and the rear projection screen. A lot of this is repeating a bit, but this does sound like the Steve Alcorn book to me. Keep going. We said this part already. And it all must roll, as you said already, in absolute silence. I know you've read this book back to front, so it's just etched in your brain. But absolute silence without vibration during even the most quiet moments of the show. Because of the weight of the lifts, the hydraulics must be capable of exerting extremely large amounts of force. However, this means that if a lift is ever commanded to go up accidentally when it's underneath the concrete floor, beneath the audience, or below the rear projection screen, it will do irreparable damage to the figures, scenery, and whatever is above it. As a result, Glenn, Bob, and Steve designed an elaborate system of safeguards and interlocks into the stage control system. To further complicate matters, a second carriage rolls crossways to the first, simulating a raft floating down a river across the stage. The raft is mounted to the front of the smaller carriage on a hinge and is raised into position when needed. The small carriage can roll so far forward the raft is over the large carriage, so it must be up during this movement to avoid a collision. And an additional lift mounted on the small carriage is raised while the small carriage is about halfway through its travel. And the lift must not be allowed to rise while the small carriage is under the curve of the rear projection screen, nor can the small carriage be allowed to move the raft over the large carriage when figures have been raised from it, or vice versa. And finally, there are various set pieces that are extended above the lift, such as the roofs of some buildings, that too must be in the fully down position or the carriage will not clear the structures above it. In all, it is a control nightmare.
That it is.
Yeah.
And yet I've only been evacuated from that show once.
Same, and were we in the same show?
Fourth of July last year, not 2021.
When the animatronic was like face down?
Yep.
No, it was first. Will Rogers was having a little trouble with the lasso, and things started going slower and slower, and then the submarine got stuck. I was with Jill. I don't know if you were there.
The guy in the George Washington scene. The guy was like flat down, and the other guy with shoes is talking to him, and he's on the ground.
Ain't a dozen men alive what can say that.
It's like, you're on the floor. Yeah. And despite the technical problems and changes to the show's plot, Imagineers completed the American Adventure on time.
So wait. January 1982.
Park opens October 1st.
To October 1982.
Yeah.
They essentially built the entire show.
Well, it was built. They had to do no programming of any kind had been done.
So the structure was there.
Yeah.
No programming of any kind.
Of the most complicated show they had ever put together.
No audio, no video.
Nothing.
Nothing was put together. 24
Just
computers
construction was
had
done.
yet to be programmed.
Yep.
And they did it in 9 months.
A thing they had never done before.
Yeah. And
now it takes
long
us over a
has
year to
Tron
get a
been
Figment
under
meet and greet.
construction?
Oh, forget it. Let's remember, like, It's a Small World was built in 9 months also, right?
Yeah.
Start to finish on the project.
Yeah.
You know?
But it is, as great as It's a Small World is, it's far less complicated.
That boat ride the boat system was brand new at the time. Like, it was still pretty complicated. Not this complicated, but still pretty also, animatronic. These were still the first animatronic. They were the least impressive of the first animatronics, but nonetheless, they were animatronics.
There were a lot of them.
Just a ton.
They didn't have to move on boxcars silently and without vibration.
No, they did not. But again, 20-year difference, right? So yes, the American Adventure opened with Epcot Center on October 1st, 1982. The pavilion was dedicated on October 11th and 12th. This was normal of the opening of Epcot in that they had ceremonies throughout the month.
All up.
Yeah, it's very slowly. I mean, again, there was a lot of corporate sponsors, a lot of sponsors, other countries that were sponsors. So they didn't want like everyone to overlap. They wanted to sort of focus on each event, in some sort of order. Yeah. So we have, obviously, Martin Smith is the great keeper of the Epcot videos. The only real good video of the original version of the American Adventure is Martin. So we'll roll that while we continue to talk. Jake can roll that for us. Jake, you go to the fast forward a bit to the actual start of the show, because otherwise he's just going to repeat some facts and such that we've covered thus far. And you can take the sound all the way down because we're gonna be talking a bunch. Thank you. We'll talk quickly about the facade of the building. George Terpazzi was the architect for the building that houses the American Adventure. The architecture of the building is done in the classic English Georgian style, and elements in the Disney building found inspiration in Independence Hall, Boston's Old State House, and Colonial Williamsburg. The 110,000 bricks are handmade from Georgian clay. Designers added color and then aged them to make them look authentic. And the American Adventure uses a reverse application of the usual forced perspective concept. Well, of course, you all know what forced perspective is. It makes a smaller building look much larger. It's a movie studio trick. This was the opposite in that this giant, complicated show was massive. And they're like, well, it's like the biggest show building we've got in World Showcase, and we've got to hide it in some way. So they did the opposite of forced perspective. They tried their best to make the building look smaller than it actually is. It is a giant, giant, giant building. It's very tall. It's very wide. It's very big. So they use the reverse version of the trick to make you feel like it's not so big.
The doors and the windows on the first floor are way oversized.
Yeah.
To make it look obviously from a distance. But
then when you walk up, you're like, oh, that's all the way up there, that awning. Yeah. Where the doors go all the way up to the second story.
Yep.
Right? And we could keep rolling through that script a bit. We've covered the forced. Our audience knows forced perspective pretty well, I think. There we go. No, keep going. Well, here we go. It's designed to be the visual focal point of World Showcase as you look across the lagoon. It's an easily seen structure and imposing, to be sure. However, to get the building to look like it had been constructed at least 5 stories tall, if it wasn't that tall, it would be too short to be the focal point. But colonial buildings were not taller than 3 stories, so this very tall structure is actually designed, again, to look like only 3 stories using that reverse forced perspective. So next time you stand next to the building, again, like we just said, stand next to the windows, stand under the awning. It's pretty funny. I want to talk about the lobby gallery for a minute, because this is one of the most underappreciated things probably in all of Disney World. It is one of the most remarkable Imagineering art galleries, probably bar none. But within World Showcase at Epcot, it's this. Let's keep going.
Keep talking about the rotunda, because we have a nice rotunda.
We do, but in that rotunda, in that space, if you look past the Soul exhibit, there is a lot of really amazing art. Not that the Soul exhibit is bad, but there's a lot of very interesting stuff to talk about in regards to this art gallery. And I feel like guests, because Voices of Liberty performing, and there's the more heavily marketed whatever the exhibit is off to the right side that's behind the wall. People kind of miss these, and so I want to talk about these. Keep rolling. We're not to the description of them yet. No. Go back up another paragraph. We'll take it from. No, one more up. And this is surprising. The Disney Parks blog, not often known for its great pieces. Every once in a while, several years ago, they used to do some of these really thoughtful historical pieces, and there is one about a majority of the art on display in that lobby. One of the most peculiar conventional wisdoms about Disney is that somehow, because the medium is entertainment and wildly popular, the art created for Disney is somehow less than or inferior or not fine art. Many of the artists who worked at the Disney studios and the other movie studios of the mid-20th century and on up until today were impeccably trained fine artists, said Mary Platt, director of the Hilbert Museum of California Art at Chapman University. In fact, the majority of them did fine art on the side and continued to do so even after they took jobs at the movie studios. Mary Blair, for example, and her husband Lee, who both worked at Disney, began as fine artists who both graduated from, what is that?
Cal Arts.
No, but above that.
Chenard.
It was Chenard, now Cal Arts, and exhibited outstanding paint. I didn't know it was something else before that. Of course, Ivan Earl may be best known for his work on Disney's Sleeping Beauty and other animated features and shorts, but he also made a living as a fine art painter with a highly distinctive style. You'll see a lot of Ivan Earl non-Disney art come up in art auctions all the time. He did a lot. Herb Ryman graduated with honors from the Art Institute of Chicago, and Robert McCall was a very accomplished magazine illustrator whose work also appeared on U.S. postage stamps. Their talents were so expansive that even movies couldn't contain them. So here are some of the artists, their original art pieces represented in the American Adventure. So Jake, if we'd stop the film for a minute, I have these numbered for you so we could show these in order. And the next time you go to the American Adventure, I beg you to go stand and look at some of this art for a bit. It's really amazing stuff. And again, that's why I think so often, there's been so many times we've argued here at WDWNT where people are like, it's just a theme park, like when a ride gets replaced or something. And no, the truth is it's art, right? And this is a great example of that these were artists and this is legitimate art. And just because it's in a theme park doesn't make it not art. So the first piece we're going to look at is The Promise of America. It's an epic interpretation of the American immigration experience by Disney legend Herb Ryman. And you've undoubtedly seen this one. I love this piece. This also, what's funny is this, I think, is in the newest version of Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln at Disneyland. They show a lot of American Adventure stuff ended up getting in there. As a prime example, Herbie's a prime example, an artist who bridged the commercial and fine arts throughout his long career with work in one sphere inspiring the other. Herb created the first overall illustration of Disneyland, working directly with Walt as he described his dream for a new kind of family entertainment, and continued to work on every Disney theme park until he passed in 1989. Ryman was also an exhibiting fine artist, a member and president of the California Art Club. He was particularly prolific in pen and ink, watercolor, and oil. His work was shown regularly in galleries as early as 1937 in New York, Los Angeles, and other cities. An educational enterprise that bears his name, Ryman Arts, teaches classical drawing and painting to talented and motivated high school students as a bridge to a lifetime that expresses and appreciates the arts. I love this piece so much. Next up is Westward Ho, which portrays a highly cinematic view of the European expansion into the American West. And it's no surprise that it was the work of multiple Oscar-winning production designer Jack Martin Smith. The artist joined MGM in 1937 and 2 years later found himself working as a production designer on The Wizard of Oz. He spent most of his working life at MGM on classics such as Easter Parade, On the Town, and Showboat. Jack moved to 20th Century Fox, where his work included Carousel, Cleopatra, Fantastic Voyage, Planet of the Apes, Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, Hello Dolly, and MASH, as well as TV series such as Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, Lost in Space, and even Batman. His last film before his retirement was the 1977 Disney classic Pete's Dragon. Next up, we have Giving Thanks. It's a Rockwellian observation of the American family by Disney legend Sam McKim, an artist whose career as Walt Disney Imagineer included a generation of souvenir maps of Disneyland and many drawings, sketches, and paintings for other Disney parks and projects. Sam began as a popular child actor in numerous B-westerns in the 1930s, but as he approached adulthood, decided to pursue a career in art. He joined WED, now Walt Disney Imagineering, as an illustrator in 1954, the year before Disneyland opened. And among Sam's first assignments were artworks for attractions, shops, and restaurants on Main Street and in Frontierland, including the Golden Horseshoe Revue. He played a part in all of the Disney attractions at the 1964-65 New York World's Fair, as well as the Hall of Presidents at the Magic Kingdom in Florida. Did I not give you that one? You don't have that one? No. Okay. All right. Do you have the next one? Yep. Okay. Next one is, we'll pad that one in post. Next one is Staying the Course. It's a seafaring epic representing transatlantic European immigration by Oscar-nominated artist, painter, and special effects artist Mike Lloyd. It's renowned for his matte and effects work in such films as Raiders of the Lost Ark from 1983 through to 1990. Mike assumed leadership of the Disney Studios matte department, and in that time working on such varied projects as Dick Tracy, Baby, Secret of the Lost Legend, I don't even know that one, and of course, Return to Oz. Why does Back to the Future always end up at Return to Oz? No matter what we do, somehow, some way. But for that, he was nominated for the Best Visual Effects Oscar, shared with Zoran Perisic and Will Vinton and Ian Wingrove. His other film work includes Independence Day, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, and The Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, and oh, last but not least, Avatar. Passing the Baton is unique in this exhibit. This one we don't have either, because it is a relief sculpture rather than a painting, appropriate to the work of Disney legend Blaine Gibson. Gibson started in animation at Disney on films such as Lady and the Tramp, Sleeping Beauty, 101 Dalmatians. But after Walt learned of Blaine's hobby and saw one of Blaine's sculpture exhibits, he moved Blaine from animation to Imagineering. And there Gibson created sculptures for Walt Disney's Enchanted Tiki Room, Great Moments of Mr. Lincoln, and every president in the Hall of Presidents at Walt Disney World up to George W. Bush. He also did the Pirates in Pirates of the Caribbean, the Haunted Mansion, It's a Small World. And although he retired in 1983, Blaine continued to contribute sculptures for the Great Movie Ride at Disney's Hollywood Studios and the beloved partner statue of Walt and Mickey Mouse. Yeah, so remember that the next time you defend Runaway Railway, you erased a bunch of Blaine Gibson's work for flat projection surfaces, folks. Put that in perspective. Defending Freedom, picturing the massive World War II aviation manufacturing efforts, and is the work of R. Tom Gillian. Raised by his grandparents in the tiny outpost of Stark, Florida, Gillian studied at the University of Florida and joined the U.S. Navy in the early 1960s. He studied at Ringling College of Art and Design and subsequently took a job as an illustrator for NASA's Apollo space program. And since that time, he's spent many years contributing concept art for dozens of projects at Walt Disney Imagineering, including EPCOT and New Tomorrowland at the Magic Kingdom, as well as work as an illustrator and storyboard artist on films such as Dick Tracy. The talents of scenic artist Clem Hall, 1913 to 2003, is showcased in three works: Election Day, Building a Future Together, and Compassion Knows No Bounds. He's another film industry veteran. Clem worked in the art department of MGM, Paramount, and the Walt Disney Studios, finally at Walt Disney Imagineering. His art there was created for the development of Pirates of the Caribbean and the Haunted Mansion at Disneyland, and for Space Mountain and Big Thunder Mountain at both Disneyland and Walt Disney World, and on several of the World Showcase pavilions. A Lesson for the Future is a romantic visualization of the American educational ideals. It's the work of illustrator, animation artist, and painter of the Old West, Guy Deal, lived from 1933 to 2005. Guy studied under famed illustrator and art director Pruitt Carter on a scholarship to the Art Center College of Design, as well as studying sculpture at the Otis College of Art and Design. At Walt Disney Studios, Deal designed clever main title sequences for such films as The Shaggy D.A. and The Strongest Man in the World, and was a key layout and workbook artist on The Rescuers and production stylist on Oliver and Company. He was a character designer on The Lion King and Pocahontas, contributed visual development to Tarzan, Fantasia 2000, The Emperor's New Groove, Treasure Planet, and Brother Bear. His Old West illustrations graced the pages of national magazines as well as book covers of leading Western authors. Reaching for the Stars is an ambitious view of space exploration, the work of Robert McCall, who lived from 1919 to 2010, who came to public attention in the early 1960s as the illustrator for Life magazine series on the future of space travel. At the time, he became one of the few artists to be chosen for NASA to document the progress of American space history. His work is on permanent exhibit at the National Gallery of Art, and he has done murals for the National Air and Space Museum, the Pentagon, and Johnson Space Center. His murals for the Horizons Pavilion at EPCOT, views of the future human settlements Nova Site, Bravo Centauri, and Sea Castle, as well as the optimistic The Prologue and the Promise in the exit area, were especially beloved. And his motion picture work included 2001: A Space Odyssey, The Black Hole, Tora Tora Tora, and Star Trek: The Motion Picture.
Wow.
This is a
What a
incredible
Yeah.
group of people, right?
Robert McCall's one of my favorites.
I mean, The Prologue and the Promise is one of the
Amazing.
greatest. You know, as an Epcot Center fan, that's
Yes.
like the whole that and the
But
Spaceship
also the
Earth
Black
entrance
Hole,
mural,
the
right?
greatest film of the 1970s.
I mean, you had people that
80s.
worked on The Black Hole, Brother Bear, Treasure Planet.
I ain't making a
Baby.
joke, but you also had The Wizard of Oz, 2001: A Space Odyssey, Avatar, also the highest grossing and most influential films of all time are there also, right?
Yep.
Remember, these weren't story guys either. These were artists. So those movies, a lot of them are
Wasn't
still
their
very
fault.
pretty, right?
Wasn't their fault.
None of them are ugly movies. Oh, boy. Did the children behave during my presentation? Just got to check on them.
Yeah, very, very little of the chat was related to your.
Oh, boy. Come on, kids. You got to learn.
Content.
We got to teach you something. If we're going to, make weird cocktails and burn puppets, we got to learn something, too. It's got to be edutainment, right?
Yeah.
I think we could just burn puppets and they'd be
That's
happy.
what we aspire
No.
to here at WDWNT.
No, you should.
Edutainment.
I think it's important as Disney fans to learn who these people are and their influence and why, and why this is important. I think there's so many people in the world that look down at theme park as an art form, right? These are legitimate artists. The medium is pretty interesting and different, but these are legitimate artists, and it should be treated as art, right? So, anyway, let's get to the theater, shall we? After exiting the American Adventure Pavilion, guests enter the Hall of Flags. Here, 44 different flags from American history are showcased. Flags located here include revolutionary flags, colonial flags, and even foreign flags from the countries that first came to America.
I love those flags, by the way. That's amazing.
It's a cool, it's just a room with escalators. They found a way to make it interesting, right? And in the theater, 12 life-size statues represent the spirits of America. Jake, we do have images of these. The statues located in the main theater are the spirit of individualism. It's a cowboy. A spirit of knowledge, a woman holding a book and a scroll. The spirit of innovation, a scientist. The spirit of tomorrow, a woman holding a baby. The spirit of self-reliance, a farmer holding a shovel. The spirit of heritage, a Native American woman. Spirit of independent, an American patriot from the Revolutionary War. The spirit of freedom, a male pilgrim. The spirit of discovery, a frontiersman. The spirit of compassion, a female doctor. The spirit of pioneering, a male aviator. And the spirit of adventure, a sailor. What's really cool, if you go to Disneyland, they have the maquettes. They're in the Main Street Opera House in the pre-show for Lincoln. So obviously these are great when you see them at the American Adventure, but it's cool to see that history at Disneyland. Again, Lincoln, there's so many connections between American Adventure and Lincoln, especially the most recent version of that show. And some of them are pretty in your face like this one.
These are not hidden from you when you're in the theater.
No.
But the reveal when the curtains open behind them,
Yeah,
showing
that's
the
amazing.
field of stars
I
and the
wish that-
blue,
I wish
it
that
is
wasn't-
really powerful and interesting and amazing.
I wish that wasn't like so quick and at the end because a lot
It
of
is
people
real
don't
fast.
see it. I wish there was more focus and time.
It is.
Because it's great.
Because
Really
once
great.
they all open, immediately they start closing again, right?
Yeah,
Like it's the
yeah.
big moment. You get like 5 seconds, and
Yeah.
then they start one by one going down again.
I heard they're making an 11th one. It's called The Spirit of Money, Bob Chapek.
It's just him like this with cash. Oh man. The sailor. People are saying the sailor's their favorite. Okay, cool.
I
Please
do like the
inform Tom I was
sailor.
paying attention.
I do like the sailor.
This
it
will
looks
all
like
be
Mickey
on the
on the
test.
Magic.
So we'll be on the test, kids.
Yep.
The theater itself has 1,000 seats. This is a big one. Big one. All right, now, Jake, if you want to pop, we'll pop back over to the video. The opening scene, the American Adventure begins in complete darkness. Guests can, however, hear the voice of Ben Franklin as he quotes John Steinbeck. And as the first scene rises, guests see Ben Franklin sitting behind a desk reading with Mark Twain seated off nearby. And as Twain begins to doze off, Franklin concludes quoting Steinbeck by saying, "Stained and tinted with all colors, a seeming ethnic anarchy. This is, then in a little time, we became more alike than we were different. In society, not great, but fitted by our very thoughts for greatness." Franklin and Twain then begin to banter about humility before Twain says that the American adventure should begin with Franklin. Franklin corrects him, saying that the story of the Americans actually begins before him. And as he speaks, images of ships crossing the ocean and then a picture of the Mayflower reaching America are shown.
There's a land across this ocean I'm dying to see.
Again, we could just do every line of this show. And now we are in fact New World Bound. At this point, the attraction's first song, New World Bound, as sung by Eric Morton, begins to play.
Land ho, me hearties.
Nearly all have survived. Like, oh no. And as the song plays, images of pilgrims coming to the New World are shown. The song tells the story of the troubles that pilgrims faced. This is interesting to start with.
They ran out of Quaker Oats.
This is pretty ambitious. Like, we're going to time the curtain to this, like, going into color, because it starts in, like, the sepia, right?
Yep.
And then it's like, it's got to line up. And, of course, for years it didn't until they did the 2018 refurb. But here you see this older video. It did line up. They had it. Think of that in the time they did it, that they got that to line up every show. It's a cool moment for sure. And New World Bound, keep scrolling, as lyrics by Exitencio and Randy Bright and music by Buddy Baker. This is a composition
Classic.
for this show. Yeah,
Which is so this is interesting because this is actually one of a very few Epcot attractions that used music that pre-existed, like Two Brothers.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Like this song was written for the show.
They still made new music for it, yeah.
They still made new music for it, but they made new music for almost everything at Epcot, but this show in particular used some
Has
other
a couple
songs.
little ditties.
Yeah.
I think it's surprising given how much, like, Americana music
That exists.
was available, that there was original songs. So I didn't know that. Like, I always assumed these were all just, everything in this was pre-existing. Obviously, when you go see, like, I never thought the "O Canada" song was their national anthem. Like, I figured that this feels like a Disney song. But then Impressions of France was, you know.
Yeah, that's classic.
Yeah. Then we move on to the Declaration of Independence after the New World Bound ends. Ben Franklin informs
The
guests
British
that
think it's
America
fools we be.
was not an easy place for settlers. Franklin then continued that in the future decades, America would face a new problem, a growing separation from Great Britain, showing on the screen rallying against Britain and debating what to do. Franklin informs guests that, quote, "First we spoke out with our voices, then we spoke with action, with a growing defiance that led to the Boston Tea Party." And at this point, the screen goes dark and a large glass scroll comes down from the ceiling. The scroll is a proclamation from King George III telling the colonists that in response to the Boston Tea Party, Boston Harbor will be closed.
That's glass?
Yeah. It's
This could have just been projected.
I know, right?
Isn't this the craziest thing?
Yeah, it's like side-lit glass, etched glass.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
Uh-huh. It's the crazy. I
never knew that.
I love this, but it's so cool. And yeah, you're right. Like this is one of those things that you're thinking, man, this would have just been super easy as a projection, but they went through the trouble and didn't get budget cut to actually do it this way.
And
it's
today
pretty
that would just
amazing.
be a scrim that you project onto,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Not this crazy piece of side-lit glass, right? Scroll down a little bit, Jake. We're up to Ben Franklin's walking up the steps now. But now we see Thomas Jefferson sitting in his loft working tirelessly, and Benjamin Franklin then climbs up the stairs into the loft. And after an exasperated Jefferson then proclaims that John Adams should have been the one to write the Declaration, after some reassurance from Franklin, by his own admittance, you could write circles around him. He even
Mr. Adams has not been prisoner here in this loft for 17 days or whatever.
I will continue tomorrow.
You must continue now, Thomas.
Oh, man.
It is difficult to make 13 bells chime at the same time.
God. I knew this was going to be out of control. Keep scrolling. We basically are just doing the show at this point. And of course, he reads, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." They justified separation, of course, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then we move on into the days of 76.
That's when we find out that Ben Franklin was sleeping through the whole meeting.
He slept soundly through the meeting this morning. And as the scenes of the American Revolution are shown on the screen, guests hear the traditional song "In the Days of 76. And at the conclusion of the song, the images of the Revolutionary War stop. Guests are then shown an image of the 13 united colonies as Benjamin Franklin comments, "In the end, we the people prevailed and achieved perhaps our greatest dream. 13 very different colonies became the United States of America, and we were free to become an entire nation of dreamers and doers." And then here's this George. We're looking at the George Washington scene, where we talk a lot about shoes.
Did you ever see that on the old Ben Stiller show when it's like the C student that travels back in time? And they're like, she doesn't remember anything about history except like little snippets. So she's like telling George Washington, "I don't know, shoes." So they're like, "We crossed the river, and what's with all these damn shoes?"
Isn't that just like Bill and Ted? Like that was their whole thing. Like they meet all these important people, but they never learn anything, right? There they are. And following the end of the Revolutionary War, Mark Twain takes over as the show's primary host, and Twain announces that America is westward bound, heading to new frontiers. As images of horses, Indians, frontiermen, and a panhandler flicker on the screen, Mark Twain tells Ben Franklin, "Yes, sir, Dr. Franklin, your founding fathers gave us a pretty good start, don't you know? We still had some things to learn the hard way. It seems a whole bunch of folks found out that we the people didn't yet mean all the people," folks like Frederick Douglass. I think this is pretty progressive for 1982. You know, like, again, Hall of Presidents wasn't handling a lot of real heavy issues. Not a lot of Disney attractions were.
Yeah.
This might be the first one
This
that
is the
really
only spot in
addresses...
Epcot where people acknowledge their faults.
Yeah, so people need to put that in perspective, right? Like, this might be the first theme park attraction that gets quite this heavy, right? That snaps you back into reality, and that, you know, life isn't fair for everyone, right? And again, this insane animatronic that floats by on a boat. Again, in unison to like the backdrop, right? The idea of like we're gonna have the film be the, you know. What's funny about this to me is now, like, you look at how they shoot The Mandalorian. They have that crazy setup where the film it's actually behind them, and that's kind of doing it, right?
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah. I mean, that's exactly the same concept of the Bourne stunt show at Universal.
Yeah,
where they're like sort
you're
of
right.
walking, but the background is moving.
So far ahead of its time.
Except that these are real.
I mean, that one guy in the Bourne is real.
But yeah, Frederick Douglass shown on a raft flowing down the Mississippi River. He then speaks to Twain directly. "Even amidst the cricket song here along Mark Twain's beloved Mississippi, I hear the noise of the chains and the crack of the whip. Yet there's hope born from the words of Harry Beecher Stowe. Uncle Tom's Cabin has given our nation a key which can unlock the slave prison to millions. Anti-slavery is no longer a thing to be prevented. It has grown too abundant to be snuffed out like a lantern." And as Douglas drifts away, the screen once again goes dark, and then a family portrait is shown as two brothers are heard arguing over the merits of Southern succession. And as their father tells them not to ruin Ma's birthday.
Troublemakers like Douglas got us into this mess.
Real good Philly Yank. Their mother tells them she's just happy. She actually says, Ain't nothing gonna ruin today. As the camera flashes, taking the family's picture, the song Two Brothers begins to play. And as images showing the Civil War are shown on the screen, the song Two Brothers is played. The song tells the story of two brothers who end up fighting on opposite sides in the war. It's inferred that the song is talking about the family who was previously shown getting their family portrait taken. The Two Brothers lyrics and music are by Irving Gordon, vocals by Ali Olmo. This is
Pretty deep.
yeah, again, right? It's like, yeah, people died, right? We're not, I don't think we're dancing around. Like, we've already, we've come out and said, like, yep, it's about slavery, and now we're getting into, like, yeah, families were divided, people died.
Yeah, there's a way to bring it home.
Cannonball don't pay no mind, right?
Yep.
Oh, that scene right there, that's the one you told me was Disneyland.
Oh, it is. Yeah, Jake, can you back up a second and pause on that train station? Just right there.
Yeah.
So that's Disneyland. That's the New Orleans Square station. It's the other side of the tracks. That's where they staged that.
These all look like historical photos, and then we just fudge one that's taken at Disneyland.
It works. There it is. There's Disneyland.
They're like, we're going to need an old man, a casket, a grieving widow, and something that just sounds like Middle America town.
That blew my mind when and then we went to Disney and I looked and I was like, that is the building.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool. Pretty cool. It's right. Theme park inspired by how movies are made, and then the sets are so beautiful in the theme park that you use them in a movie, right? It's all full circle.
They use the Germany Pavilion in Werther's commercials.
All of World Showcase was in Thunder in Paradise. Hulk Hogan was in Morocco. He was at the Grand Floridian. He was everywhere. All right, let's keep, since we've mentioned Hulk Hogan now, we're going to keep moving. Maybe he should have been the third host to the American Adventure, right? All the great Americans, Ben Franklin, Mark Twain, Hulk Hogan.
Hulk Hogan.
Say your prayers and eat your vitamins. The other song, The Family Portrait, shown earlier, is shown again. This time, however, one of the brothers fades away due to the fact that he died.
He faded away like Marty McFly's family. I don't understand that part.
Something's got to be done about your kids. The Two Brothers song that drives...
Marvin Berry figured it out, got him going, he came back.
God. This is your cousin, Marvin Lincoln. The Two Brothers song that drives the storyline forward during the Civil War history actually was a part of Disneyland's Great Moments with Mr. Lincoln. Remember the film, there's a scene where a train depot is seen. The depot is at one time the train station at New Orleans Square. It now serves as a decoration on the opposite side of the train tracks at the theme park. So that was the train station originally, and then eventually they moved the station to the other side. It's at this moment that an amazing American Adventure detail comes to life. Most miss it, but most important, and happens for a reason. Up until this point in the saga, all the rear screen projected images have been paintings and illustrations. History then is shown differently from this point forward. The reason, because the camera had not yet been invented until this era. So from this point on, actual photographs are used. And then we enter the late 19th century. Following the end of Two Brothers, Franklin tells guests that the Civil War finally ended with the country rebuilding. Immigrants had began to pour into the United States. As Franklin states that seems there was a new dawn coming for the American Adventure. He's cut off by Chief Joseph. The Indian chief emerges from below the stage and responds to Franklin's claims, saying, enough of your words. Let your new dawn lead to the final sunset on my people's suffering. When I think of our condition, my heart is heavy. I see men of my own race treated as outlaws or shot down like animals. I hope that all of us may be brothers with one country around us and one government from all. From where the sun now stands, I will fight no more, forever. And as Chief Joseph disappears, the sunset behind him turns to a starry night. And Mark Twain then returns to the stage, telling guests that the wisdom of the great Chief Joseph reminds us once again of our long, painful journey through the frontiers of human liberty. It's one atrocity after another, right? I mean, how much more do people? What did we skip over? That, we're hitting all these points pretty fast. And as the scene changes, guests see the Great Hall in Philadelphia. In front of it, 4 booths rise up, and on stage are Mark Twain, Alexander Graham Bell, Andrew Carnegie, and Susan B. Anthony. And as Susan B. Anthony gives a short speech for women's suffrage, Mark Twain informs guests that they are back in Philadelphia again and that America is 100 years old today. Carnegie, Twain, and Graham Bell then discuss the latest inventions of the day, with Carnegie summing up that it's an age for grand ideas, an era for innovation. Graham Bell and Anthony chime in. There's also, I already said it. I blew it. And as the booths descend, guests are shown dioramas which feature the latest technological achievements. I love this moment so much, this hand-drawn animation of inventions of the time. It's so 80s
Very
Epcot.
Epcot.
Yeah.
It is like this last vestige of old Disney attractions, it feels like. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything about it, but the animation, I don't know,
It's a lot like World of Motion.
it does capture
Yes,
a lot of.
very much like World of Motion.
It feels like 82 Epcot in every way. By the way, also, this We Ask Equality line from Susan B. Anthony ends up going into Spaceship Earth later, the 1994 version. There's sort of all this, there's a lot of sort of chatter at the start of that ride as you go up the ascent, and that Susan B. Anthony line is used again there.
It used to happen right about the time where they now take your picture.
Yeah, somewhere about there. Maybe a little early. Maybe like as soon as you start going up the ramp at that point. Here it is. And it's survived, right? No one at any point has been like, let's redo that.
No.
This is like the one thing I feel like people at WDI have fought for, like even Tom Fitzgerald. I feel like this is the one thing everyone's like, you got to protect this thing. It's,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, look at it. I mean, that's a World of Motion right there with the biplane.
It's probably the Epcot attraction that is closest to its original form, right? Like Living with the Land is not far off either, but like losing that whole Symphony of the Seed intro distances that more than this is distance from its original version, right?
Right.
Because we're going to talk about the changes, and there's honestly not a lot of them. So among those inventions featured are the light bulb, the trolley, and the moving picture. And Twain states that America was flying into the 20th century on the wings of invention and the winds of change, and that since we were facing these new changes, we needed people like Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir to lead us.
I wonder how many of 150 college students knew who John Muir was.
I bet more people probably knew who he was.
No, there's no way that
You don't
more of them
think
knew who
so?
John Muir was
I don't
than,
think so.
well, than Will Rogers.
I feel like I learned who he was in college, which was kind of
I mean, people
not
knew the
in my
name. I'm not sure they could
hemisphere.
say anything about him.
yeah. Sequoias, avalanches, floods.
The guy's trying to free solo El Cap.
God. Tremendous demand on our resources. Oh, now usually he looks like he's always going to fall off that rock.
I
if you
know,
go now.
I
He's just
know.
always like leaning off the rock. Look, they moved better in the 80s than they move now.
Sure.
And which is sad given we're going to talk about upgrades that were made later. But then this will take us into World War I and the Great Depression. And the next scene shows Teddy Roosevelt, again, this Teddy Roosevelt and John Muir standing on a rock debating the need for national parks. Muir is eventually able to impress upon the president that Roosevelt needs to stop the massive destruction of the parks. After Roosevelt says he agrees that they need to protect the country's resources, Muir says, then start it here and now. Make this valley a part of Yosemite National Park. And as the rock that Roosevelt and Muir are standing on lowers in the stage, Mark Twain comments that, ready or not, we were soon thrust into the hectic role of a world leader and into the war to end all war. Following this proclamation, footage of World War I is shown, including a picture of Sopwith Camel with a caption, another enemy airplane falls to America's gallant ace, Captain Eddie Rickenbacker. And after this, the scene changes to a parade being held in honor of Charles Lindbergh. And a news report is then heard during which a newscaster tells guests that Lindbergh successfully made a solo flight across the Atlantic Ocean aboard his plane, the Spirit of St. Louis. And as the newscast finishes, guests hear a second newsman who tells them that on October 29, 1929, the stock market has crashed. And as the newscast finishes, a scene depicting a 1929 gas station appears on stage. 4 men are shown listening to the radio. A banjo player can be heard singing, "Brother, can you spare a dime?"
I'll lend you a dime.
Buy one of my apples, I'll lend you 4 quarters, right? Something like that. Lyrics by E.Y. Harburg and music by Jay
I built a
Gorney.
tower to the sun. Sorry.
Can't resist. It's one of the most quotable attractions of all time. It really shouldn't be because it's educational, but
Right?
it's very, very well written, right? Keep scrolling. And as the song finishes, the men discuss how things seem to be getting better before one of them explains that Franklin Delano Roosevelt has been inaugurated. FDR then appears on the left, the gas station behind a presidential podium. That's not where he gave this address, by the way. I want to clarify that.
Next to a gas station in Alabama.
Oh, man. He just bring a podium out. He gives a short speech including that, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." As one of the men comments that America could use some prosperity, Will Rogers can be heard on the radio. As he continues to speak, Rogers can be seen on the right side of the stage. He stands behind a studio mic and says, "But you know, it seems to me that we was a mighty cocky nation. We had begun to believe that the height of civilization was an automobile, a radio, and a bathtub. Of course, now we're a lot smarter. Now Congress wants to trim down the Navy so it'll fit in the bathtub too. You know, it seems to me like we're the only nation in this country that waits till they get into a war before we start getting ready for it." And as Will Rogers finishes, another radio announcer speaks, saying that yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date that will live in infamy, the United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and ground forces. We enter World War II. Give the video a second to catch up with us. There they go. The gas station has fallen. And as the gas station fades away, a shipyard is shown. And here Rosie the Riveter is wielding a piece of a battleship.
Welding.
Oh, sorry,
She's not
welding.
wielding.
Sorry.
She's welding.
Welding a piece. She just has it. She's like, where does this go? Piece of the battleship, and over the radio, "I'll Be Home for Christmas" is playing. This is a later version. Originally, there is a Rosie the Riveter song that played, and this is like one of the few changes that is made to the main show prior to the montage. This is the only thing over the years that really got touched. It's not.
You know why?
I don't know if they just thought that it resonated more with people, if it's like they were working on Christmas and "I'll Be Home for Christmas," and it's like, you know, everyone's sacrificing to make the American dream live on, right? That kind of deal. I don't know. It says, "Yes, that was dedicated to you, Rosie. Tens of thousands of you across the face of America working tonight to keep our boys in the fight. We wish you all out there a very Merry Christmas." Again, a Rosie the Riveter song used to play on the radio at the beginning of the scene. Following the radio announcement, Rosie and a sailor discuss the state of the battleship before another worker emerges on a lift. She says that it's no wonder that they're all working double shifts at Christmas, before Rosie tells her to cheer up and maybe they'll all be together next Christmas. And the battleship disappears. Screen turns purple. Eagles fly across. And at this point, the Golden Dream montage begins. Jake, if you could back this up a little bit to the start of the number and turn it up, and let's let people enjoy the original incarnation of this, because I assume there's lots of people who have watched this who have maybe never saw the original version, as it was gone by 1993. So we'll let people enjoy this.
No, this is he means the beginning of the Rosie River.
No, this is good. No, we don't need to hear that Rosie song.
Oh, I thought you wanted to hear the Rosie song.
Yeah, it's a real song. People can find it.
Okay.
Sail on freedom's wind across the sky. Great bird with your golden dreams, flying high, flying high.
Restless one in a world of change, keeping dreams aloft in the rain. Spirit free, of time.
remembrance now of your pioneers. America, keep on flying now. Keep your spirit free, facing new frontiers.
And so, my fellow Americans, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. My fellow citizens of the world, ask not what America will do for you, but what together we can do for the freedom of man.
I have a dream this afternoon that the brotherhood of man will become a reality in this day with this faith.
40 feet down, 2.5, picking up some dust. 4 forward, drift into the right a little. Contact light. Okay, engine stop. We copy you down, Eagle. Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed.
America, spread your golden wings, sail on freedom's wings, cross the sky. Great bird, with your golden dreams, flying high, flying high. Flying high, flying high.
Well, Mr. Twain, what do you think of our America now?
I think the founding fathers never dreamed of an America like this.
Of course not. We weren't dreamers. We were visionaries. That is why our Constitution withstands the rigors of time.
Easy now, Dr. Franklin. This nation's still just a youngster, don't you know? Why, some countries have been around for 500 centuries. We're barely into our third.
That's true, but look what we've accomplished in that tiny span of time.
My dear doctor, earlier you found John Steinbeck so inspiring. And he also sounded this warning. We now face the danger which in the past has been the most destructive to the human. Success, plenty, comfort, and ever-increasing leisure. No dynamic people has
While you're at a
ever
theme park.
survived these dangers.
I may have invented these bifocals I'm wearing, but I can assure you they are not rose-colored.
He said the thing.
Mr. Twain, the golden age never was the present age. But with human liberty, we can fulfill the promise and meaning of America. To everyone a chance, believed Thomas Wolfe. To all people, regardless of their birth, the right to live, to work, to be themselves, and to become whatever their visions can combine to make them. This is the promise of America. Mr. Twain, 'tis easy to see, hard to foresee, but I foresee the American adventure to continue a long, long time.
Here's Jason's curtain moment.
America, keep on flying on. Keep your spirit free, facing new frontiers. America, spread your golden wings, sail on freedom's way.
From the rotunda. We need to install statues on the sides of the studio. I mean, again, this park, man. You walked out of every attraction inspired about whatever the hell the topic of the attraction was, right? Yeah. Which was, Walt was, right? He was optimistic. So whatever the topic was, it was just, this is the most important thing. Whether it was transportation, the ocean, communication, America, whatever it was the most important thing. You could stop there for a second, Jake. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves in 93. We're not there yet.
Can I just say?
Yeah.
We complain a lot on this show and others about screens and projections, but I have no problem with a screen and a projection as long as it has an original song that's very inspiring and curtains that span hundreds of feet on either direction.
And it's part of an attraction with dozens of animatronics.
How else could you do this giant sunset, though, anyway, right? Like, I'm not, all projection effects ever made are not inherently bad.
No,
The problem is when
saying.
you lazily rely on them, right? Like, obviously, there are things you can't, like Star Tours. You couldn't put people in actual space, right? Like, in order to do that, that's what the ride is. Same with Soarin'.
Sure.
You know, there's a time and a place, right?
Right.
Runaway Railway, like you could have built animatronics. You instead built bubble dome faces for figures, right? Like there's a difference.
Yep.
So yeah, following that World War II scene, the song Golden Dreams begins to play. The song plays images of various Americans of the 20th and 21st century are shown. The music was written by Robert Moline, who was the greatest musical find ever, I think. In the most unexpected of places, right?
Especially for EPCOT, yeah.
They just found him at a bar. It was a hotel bar, right?
I think so.
Yeah. And the lyrics were written by show producer Randy Bright. The melody had been heard in Epcot's Plaza Loop until they decided to put Spotify music in. The original version can be found on the Music of Disneyland, Disney World, and Epcot Center, 1988, The Music of Disney, A Legacy and Song, 1992, and Walt Disney World Resort, The Official Album, 1999. The updated version of the song has different vocals, a longer chorus after the quotes, and a different ending. It can be found on the Walt Disney World Official Album 2000, the official album of Walt Disney World Resort celebrating 100 years of magic, and many of the subsequent official albums. Some of the people you see in that montage over the years include Walt Disney, Neil Armstrong, Leonard Bernstein, Johnny Carson, Walt Disney, Bob Dylan, Albert Einstein, Dwight Eisenhower, Judy Garland, Chief Dan George, Alex Haley, Jim Henson, Bob Hope, Magic Johnson, John F. Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Billie Jean King, Mary Martin, Marilyn Monroe, Elvis Presley, Mary Lou Retton, Sally Ride, Jackie Robinson, Eleanor Roosevelt, Frank Sinatra, Gloria Estefan. Oh, no, sorry, not It's late.
Oh, boy.
I've been up for over 24 hours. Gloria Estefan. She should be, damn it. Let's put her. She's in Guardians. This should end with conga.
If she hadn't closed bongos.
More college students know who Gloria Estefan is
than Gloria Steinem.
Steinem.
You're absolutely right. Who is Gloria Steinem anyway?
She's a famous feminist.
Okay.
She was also I think she was like a Playboy, or she was Miss America or something.
Okay.
Something. She was very beautiful and noted for being beautiful, and then later, she was a leader in the feminist movement.
Ryan White, Frank Lloyd Wright, Tom Brokaw, Oprah Winfrey, Willie Nelson, Bill Clinton, George Bush, and of course, in later years, firefighters raising the United States flag at Ground Zero after the September 11th attacks. Yeah. We showed the end. We have to talk about that. But then we get to 1993. And so imagine this. The attraction's only 10 years old. And they're like, let's go spend a bunch of money on it. So they closed it for a major refurbishment, and every single audio animatronic figure was replaced with the latest model of the time, about just over 10 years after the attraction opened.
Wow.
Yeah.
35 audio animatronics.
And all to the latest model, right? Which would have been expensive at the time, yeah.
It would have absolutely been expensive at the time.
And then they also, the reason they did that was because also they were taking the ride down to update the finale montage, which ended with a computer animated scene now of the Statue of Liberty. By the way, computer animation still not as prevalent as it is today in 1993. Mind you, we are pre-Toy Story. We are, obviously there had been CGI sequences in films, short ones at that, but this is one of the very first in a theme park attraction. and a new version of Golden Dreams was recorded as well. What an update.
Yeah. I mean, it's not like it needed it, but
No.
this was kind of the golden era of maintenance.
Well, this moment is like, hey, Epcot has aged. Let's start going through, right? Because this like 2-3 year period is crazy because it kind of starts here, and then they do the full update of the land, Spaceship Earth, Communicord Interventions, EO to Honey. All of that is in this.
This was 93. Then you had Epcot 94 when they changed the name of the park, and then Epcot 95 when they changed the name of the park again.
But you're talking about 18 to 24 month period.
That's
all
right.
of that.
93 to
Several
95.
Spaceship Earth. All these attractions were updated
Yes.
in a 24 month period. Yeah.
No, it was a ton of money.
But yeah, that's the 93 update. And then in 2007, in mid-2007, 45 seconds of footage was added to the montage, which include moments from the last 14 years of U.S. history. And among the moments are Muhammad Ali carrying the torch of the 96 Olympics, scenes from the destroyed World Trade Center, and former President Bush and Bill Clinton working together on tsunami relief. Other personalities added include Michelle Kwan, Tiger Woods, both of who were already in the Golden Dreams montage, which was very similar to this. Pretty much a ripoff, but California, it was the history of California, the California adventure. And the firefighters, of course, who raised the flag at the World Trade Center Ground Zero. So again, finally, it took a long time to update the film, but they got to it in 2007 for the 25th of Epcot.
Which is good.
Yeah. The show didn't look bad at the time. I mean, it was time for an update, right? And then we get to the beginning of the overhaul of Epcot, and I think in this generation, this is a particularly surprising thing that Disney sunk a ton of money into the American Adventure for this 2018 update, right? So they finally put the film in digital, offering crystal clear HD projections for the first time ever. Smaller visual upgrades were also made, such as illuminated backdrops for the Declaration of Independence and Two Brothers audio animatronic sequences. The animatronic cast members were refreshed, many with costuming and animation adjustments. The most stark improvement was the transition into scenes with film backdrops. What were once rough and jittery film movements were now in perfect synchronization with raising and lowering figures, at least for a hot minute. But the biggest changes were at the end, where Golden Dream montage was reworked again. The classic song was rearranged and re-recorded for the first time in many, many years, with the montage removing many background sound effects that would play, such as noises of the equipment during the moon landing sequence. And added to the montage are many more contemporary celebrities and luminaries, such as Michael Phelps, Michelle and Barack Obama, Bill Gates, Jimmy Carter, LeBron James, Serena and Venus Williams, Beyonce, Elon Musk, Neil deGrasse Tyson, Mark Zuckerberg, and various United States Olympic teams, and more. More controversial figures such as Tiger Woods and Lance Armstrong were removed, but then also were the kids with sparklers who did nothing wrong and are not controversial.
Wait, did they leave Magic
to our
Johnson?
knowledge.
Did they leave Magic Johnson in when they got rid of Tiger Woods?
I don't know if he's. I mean, we have the Jake. If you want to roll the video while we're talking here at the end, we can bring down the music a little bit, or we can just watch. Let's just watch it. Leave it up. Let's hear the newest versions. You never get tired of hearing this, right? I happen to like this version.
America, spread your golden wings, sail on freedom's wing, across the sky. Brave bird, with your golden wings, flying high, flying high. America, you must keep
This was the portion I think they added in '93 also, right? Like the turmoil, the '60s turmoil bit. But the 1993 CGI lives on.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
No, it's really good.
You know,
Really good.
although I think they
it's better than-
reanimated.
It's better than a new Soarin'.
I think they reanimated it.
I don't, because I grew up with the original version, I don't like this re-recording of the song as much. I like that it's longer. I think it's fantastic that it's a bit longer. And it's a good version, it's just not the one I grew up with.
Well, I'm pretty sure '93 is when it added that like turmoil segment.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure that version has like the '60s turmoil.
The first time that I brought Lee home for Thanksgiving, and then we went downstairs afterwards, hanging out. Next thing you know, Hillary and Andy got their instruments out, and we were the whole family singing this song.
Yeah.
She was like, "Oh my God, these are my people."
I mean, I'm sure I speak for a lot of people, right? I don't know. I'm sure I speak for you guys. You know, we knew everything on that Disney World cassette. Backwards and forwards, right? Every car trip,
I listened to that cassette so much it got stretched out and the tone changed. That's how much.
Like my father doesn't remember anything. My father can sing the songs from Universe of Energy and Oh Canada, like because we listen to them so much.
I mean, my kids can sing them. They weren't.
But my
born.
father did a lot of drugs back in the day,
Well,
so it's
true.
very surprising. Doesn't remember much, but those songs come on and he's got it.
Yeah.
I do love, I know you don't like the current recording. I just think it fills the theater. Like this part after
dislike
them, I love.
It's bigger.
It's big and booming, and I think it's, you know, it's really uplifting here at the end after the speech.
Yeah, no, it's bigger. It's for sure bigger. It's more epic.
Yeah.
Of America. Mr. Twain, 'tis easy to see, hard to foresee, but I foresee the
American adventure to continue. A long, long time.
Sir, there's no smoking allowed at the Statue of Liberty. Please put your cigar out.
Also, like on top of everything else, they're like the Mark Twain figure's gonna smoke.
Yeah, right.
Imagine, I think if he was blowing smoke rings and like shooting ships through it, you know, like Gandalf, that would have been a cool animatronic. We got a guy twirling a lasso.
Yeah, I love this.
They said, we know Tom's dad can throw back some tequila.
Yeah.
People talk about sleeping. I've slept in this too. Most of the time I make it through. But it's not because the show is boring. It's because it's 90 degrees out and you're in a dark, cold room.
And like you walk around all day, right? Like this is, you get a 30-minute nap in. Like this has saved me on New Year's Eve before the existence of American Adventure.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of times I go in and I'm like, I want to sit and watch and enjoy the American.
Oh yeah.
But it's true. I mean, like, you know, we live in an age where park benches are hard to come by sometimes. You know, I'm gonna go in the American Adventure and sit.
Ladies and gentlemen, please
Get
Got
out.
your personal belongings. Exit to your left.
William reminded me of when we did the bit, the honest attraction names, right? And it was, please wake up for the song.
Yeah.
Or wake up for the song at the end, and it's true. I mean, I even times I've gone in their sleep, you always wake up for the song. It's like,
So-
no, gotta see this part.
So there have been some changes to this attraction, but this one and Impressions de France, I think, are the most unchanged attractions in Epcot, right?
Forget about Impressions because it is just legitimately just a straight film, right? So I think we forget about that sometimes.
But I mean, it's a large film format.
Yeah.
It's
Oh no, they did it. It's a special thing, right? The problem of Epcot, right, is if we go back to like the 80s and look at it, like I'm not trying to diminish Impressions, right? It's an achievement. But Impressions in the 80s in Epcot is
real
not
low
even
on the
in the
list.
conversation,
No,
right?
It's not.
well, it's the one thing that what Jason talked about earlier, where none of the songs are original.
Yeah.
They are all like well-known French composers.
It's a beautiful
Yeah.
composition, though.
yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. It was not anywhere even in the conversation
No.
in terms of greatest parts of Epcot.
Now, because it's
But
just
now
one of the
it
few
is.
things that
Now
survive.
it's the best
yeah.
thing in
Now
Epcot.
it's like the best
Yeah.
thing at Epcot.
Living with the Land's kind of the same thing. Like, not that it was ever a bad attraction, but like, if you ask people, like, what do you want to ride at Epcot in the 80s? Like, the first thing someone yells is not going to be listen to the Land.
No.
There was Figment, there was Horizons, there was Spaceship Earth, there was World of Motion. You know,
Yeah.
those are all going to come in before that. And maybe, I don't know, maybe
Someone asked, who's getting ad revenue from this? Like, this stream isn't going to be demonetized
Right.
for 900
it was
copyright
demonetized
violations.
the second we began,
Yeah.
probably. Yeah.
There'll be no ad revenue.
But like, we have a serious question asked now at the end, right? Because usually, Back to the Future, the end portion is what does the future hold? And obviously, we live in a really weird time where everyone's uncomfortable with talking honestly about the past. And this is not an IP thing. This is supposed to be a creative retelling of American history, right? But obviously, you know, we live in a world where some people want to omit history, some people don't want to talk about things. You know, people are uncomfortable with smoking. There's a character smoking on stage, right? Like, I can think of a million things in this show that I'm shocked no one has come after, right? Whether it's Mark Twain's cigar or, you know.
There's a segment of our society that always looks for something to be offended about or angry about. I mean, this doesn't fall on any one political side. There's just people that's what they love to do. Point out things that other people do that they find objectionable. And Mark Twain is a perfect guy that's like, screw you.
Yeah.
That seems to be right in line with his character.
Yeah. Yeah, I just, you know, it survived this long. The question is like these things like Hall of Presidents. How often do we have that conversation about how much longer is the Hall of Presidents going to continue to exist? How long are they going to bother, right? Certainly the American Adventure does not come up as much, but, you know, if we've learned anything in the last, 5 to 10 years, that you don't know what tomorrow holds, right?
Right.
And how people will feel about anything depicted in this in any number of years. But, I mean, Chapek's gone, so maybe the thought isn't like, oh my God, if they get enough complaints, they'll just try to put an IP thing in here.
Yeah.
I think we've survived that era, right?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so. And
So,
I think we're in the era now. Where everything's going to stay as it is for 2 years at least. I'm serious. That's the era that we're in.
I think like Disneyland had that period, right, where I think as Disneyland crossed its 50th anniversary, it felt like a lot of the park became sort of untouchable, right? It was like, all right, Tiki Room feels untouchable. So much of the park began to feel things that maybe were in danger in the Pressler era, I think sort of felt untouchable.
Right.
At that point. And I think Disney World has now reached that point too, where very little has survived, but what has kind of feels like it might be under like a protection order at this point, right? So
I think American Adventure is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Spaceship Earth, I think
Whether
will be
Impressions
updated,
de
but
France is I don't know.
I think they need
Mission
to. I think
Space
regardless
is
of
not
film,
untouchable.
Yeah, Impressions has to be refilmed, right? Like that country, in many places, does not even look like it looks in that film anymore.
Everyone in that film is dead.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
You know, I often wonder if Sullen Tomato Grill is still alive.
Oh, Salt and Tomato Girl.
I every time I ride that ride, I wonder.
But yeah, I mean, with EPCOT, I think so little has survived that I think everyone's on board with just, can we keep the 4 things that have survived?
I think
right?
so. I think you're absolutely right. I think you're absolutely right.
So
I
like
think that's
American
good.
Adventure, Impressions, Land, and Spaceship Earth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's true. I mean, I'm even happy with Finding Nemo because they brought the ride back. It's
not even close to the same thing.
It's not, but it's honestly, I mean, the ride is the ride.
I'm ready for that to go. Like, it's reached the point where I'm like...
They're always going to have some Omnimover going through there.
That's the first time they've extended an Omnimover track in like forever.
Well, let's remember that Chapek also wanted to knock down both of those pavilions. Let's not forget about that.
Right. Oh,
too.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Because greenhouses and sea creatures cost money to maintain. Yeah.
Can I also? This is one thing I just thought of about the montage at the end. When I was little, I always used to think when Martin Luther King was doing "I Have a Dream This Afternoon," I always thought to myself, why was he sleeping in the middle of the afternoon? I seriously, I don't know why, but that's what I thought when I was a kid.
Okay.
That's exact. I don't. I have no idea why, but I just remember.
Because he went to Impressions de France.
Maybe. Maybe. But yeah, I mean, the thing, my mind, is that this is probably the most well-kept ride in terms of functioning.
In terms of something complicated that's functioning.
Most complex ride that has maintained its functionality really well over 40 years.
Even though we know that, like, there are a lot of restrictions on the maintenance people at this attraction, right? There are a lot of things on the train they can't touch. I remember when we did the maintenance report, people reached out when things were broken. We're like, they won't let us fix it. It's like, oh, they're like, it's not a money thing. It's an OSHA thing. They won't let us near this thing.
It works amazingly well.
Yeah.
And amazingly reliably for being 40 years old.
Yeah.
The maintenance people deserve a lot of kudos for keeping it working this long because very little in EPCOT.
Well, you have to give credit to the original designers too,
Well,
right?
that
They
too,
designed
right.
something
Yes.
that can handle the test of time.
Yeah, I mean, it's one thing to design something revolutionary that changes the game. It's another thing to design something like that that is reliable, right? How many amazing attractions have been completely unreliable? Rise of the Resistance, Indiana Jones. Hell, to even bring it up, the original Journey into Imagination had a lot of problems.
Yeah.
You know, like that turntable gave them problems all the time.
Yep.
Even the People Mover used to be down all the time.
Yeah.
I mean, it still goes down a lot.
It does now. I mean, that's a whole. That's
I mean, the only
magnets don't work.
The only other thing at EPCOT that I think was as reliable was Universe of Energy.
I feel like that was down a lot. I don't know.
It might have been down.
Yeah.
More than American Adventure, but it still was pretty. It worked pretty well.
I mean, I think when we were young, I think most of the parks were reliable.
Yeah.
There wasn't a lot of stuff, and I know there's that recent study that came out. Like, they believe the last like 2 or 3 years that ride reliability is down. I'm like, you need to extrapolate that over the last 15 to 20.
Right.
Like, this is not that big a difference. You want to really see a difference, you need to go way further back in time. The data's not available, but yeah. But yeah, I think like I feel like little things are gonna happen, right? I feel like the cigar's gonna vanish. Like, those are the things I just think at some point someone's gonna, I don't know. I think there's gonna be little things that happen. I think eventually a scene or two of this ride will go, or attraction, I should say. You know, but I think in total, like, obviously it's the American Adventure, it's going to stay. And I don't think it's going to be updated to be more modern. I saw a lot of people are like, oh, they need to add another scene. Like, the last scene is World War II. And I was like, no, I think like it's good you tell the story up to that point, and then with just the quick recap, right? Like,
it's easier to tell history from a little bit more distance.
Yeah.
The montage is the recap, and that's what keeps
if
it up
it's
to
still
date.
like, if the ride, let's say under some circumstance the ride exists another 100 years, then maybe those people need to sit and have that conversation, right? I don't think, like, you've told the beginning of America up until World War II. It's a lot.
Right.
The rest from there is, again, recent enough to where people are maybe more
I think you
aware.
could add stuff, though, that is more, that probably was a little too recent when the attraction opened, like the moon landing, where it's not just a quick moment, but you could actually have a scene.
But there's no way you're going to get away with extending the length of this attraction, right? Like, that ain't going to happen.
I mean, they did. Well, they lengthened the montage.
They lengthened the montage.
A couple I mean, it's a couple
Oh,
seconds.
yeah. No, you're not going to add more
Like
scenes.
a whole scene.
You're going to add more montage.
I mean, the thing about history is it keeps marching on. We don't
You
know how long this
can't-
is going to last, but
I think
I just think it'd
can't-
have to be a real long time away before you're like, we need to like revamp the show
you
and make it
can't
extend.
physically add a scene to this show.
Yeah.
It's just not possible with the way the show scenes are designed on the train.
So the one in the most danger will always
there's
be
a world
World
in
War
which
II. Yeah.
I think there's a world in which people want to see history without it. Basically, the way we're presented history is big chunks of war and little inventions in between, right? So I think there's a thing where people are going to go, look, history is more than war. And yeah, I think there'll be an appetite for that in the future of something that's a little different. I don't agree with it or disagree with it.
Yeah.
I just think that there is a possible way that you could see them telling this story differently.
The problem is, right, in American history, like, they skip over some wars because those aren't as important, right? But like Revolutionary, Civil, and the two World Wars are really important in the story of America, right? You could skip World. I think you could skip.
There's nothing about World War I in that show.
Well, there's the plane fight and stuff. I think you could even completely skip that and it'd probably be fine, right? But World War II is when we become like the world power, right? So that's, those three I think are locked in. Like you can't take those out.
You can't take them out. I mean, if you want. One of the things that I don't like about the new montage is Mark Zuckerberg. If you want to take stuff out, like, he's really not consequential.
But he and Elon Musk are both figures who, no matter what you think of them, have been formative to our generation, right? The things they have done.
Tiger Woods was too.
Tiger Woods was too.
And we still removed him after we found out what he did at the Waffle Houses.
I really don't think Mark Zuckerberg.
Okay, it was Perkins.
Wasn't it Waffle House?
No, it's Perkins. It's now a Black Rock Grill on the corner of Conroy.
But there were Waffle House incidents.
No, it was Perkins.
Purely Perkins.
Yeah, now it's a Black Rock Grill. It's on Conroy right there.
I think Mark Zuckerberg doesn't fit with the rest of those people. Elon Musk, I agree. I think he belongs there.
Thank you.
He's very influential in today's day and age. Mark Zuckerberg is not. I don't like him. That's just me. I mean, we talk about what we would change.
Yeah.
That's what I would change.
Again,
the montage is going to change a million times.
In 25, 30 years, you're going to be like, hey, these guys might have been important.
People are going to vanish and new people are going to appear in the montage. That is without doubt. That's the part that's made to be updated. The question is really what happens to the rest of the show, but I think it'll just be I think it'll be so far from now before anyone even ever has that discussion of like what scenes do you take out and put
I don't
in.
think you take out any scenes. I think the whole thing is going to break before they get to the point where they need to take out scenes. It's going to break and they're not going to know how to fix it.
The train's just going to bust.
It's going to break and they're not going to know how to fix it. And that's what's going to cause the downfall. I mean, we talked about that with Carousel of Progress, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a point at which anyone who knows how to fix these attractions either doesn't work for the company or is not alive anymore.
They're going to have to come to you guys and be like, can we have the maintenance manual that you guys bought in the auction last year?
Yeah, right?
I hate to break the news to you. That was happening years ago. People in the industry were buying manuals to be able to fix things. Yeah, that was a thing. Like Carousel Progress, I don't see that happening, right? Because they literally built a new version of that with Smuggler's Run. Like, if that breaks and they're like, we need to modernize the turntable, someone's gonna figure out how to do a turntable.
Oh, you could rebuild an equivalent attraction.
And I think eventually someday they will rebuild American Adventure to modernize it.
Sure.
Yeah.
And that's what, I mean, we all hold out hope that someday they will rebuild Journey into Imagination.
Yeah.
Right? To a modern version of the good version.
But that you have to bring back, right? This
We can't even get the meet and greet.
I mean, almost.
Sorry.
Can we not be negative this week?
It's too long. I was just on a Different show.
Oh, no.
It's too long. We're going to have a meet and greet in a year or two.
I mean, I don't know, but they built a whole water park in Volcano Bay, and as long as it's taking them to build a water playground in Epcot.
Yeah, but
How long did Epcot take to build?
People.
How long did Epcot take to build?
The park?
Yeah.
A pretty decent amount of time. What did they break ground at 78?
79.
9?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. How long did it take to build Tron?
Triple.
They broke ground in the fall of 17, late summer
So
17.
we're in year 5.
Yeah.
It's a different world, right? Everything we do is going to be more deliberate.
Even when they don't
longer.
delay stuff, it still takes, like, let's look at OLC, who does not skimp, right? Like, Fantasy Springs has been under construction for a very long time. You know, it's several years, but it's a big project, right? But they're not cutting corners. It's just the construction world moves slower now than it did then, right?
Yeah.
That's definitely part of it. Neutron still shouldn't take 5 years, but it still was inevitably gonna at least take as long as it takes to build Epcot Center, given modern, codes and construction methods and all of those things, right?
But
I mean, they did rush Hollywood Studios, and it's falling down now.
It's fair.
The construction of Epcot Center's better constructed than a lot of things they build nowadays.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know that the codes and the codes haven't saved, the update of the codes haven't saved anyone from dying because of Epcot Center construction practice.
No, I just think there's more bureaucracy involved.
They
in
fought
building
to keep
something.
the building for Universal Energy, and then anyone you talked to on that project was like, it slowed the project down. We should have just knocked the building down and built a new one.
Sure.
Yeah.
But they fought to keep the building.
They thought it was cheaper.
Well, that's the problem,
Yeah.
right? They took the cheap way out, and then they realized it wasn't cheaper.
Yeah.
And the rest of us are here rejoicing that the building.
I mean, they should have learned that when they were redoing Disney Springs, how many times they knocked down and rebuilt existing buildings.
Sure,
right?
absolutely.
The Adventurers Club and all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean.
But anyway, are there any? So we all agree, like, the American Adventure will continue for a long, long time.
I think so. I think it has. I think it. If World Showcase still exists,
how would it not? It makes so much money. When
I know,
World
right?
Showcase is gonna go away.
How can
all
you,
those sweet alcohol sales?
How can you not have How can you have World Showcase without American Adventure? I don't think you can. I mean, you can get rid of Impressions de France. You can get rid of the movie in China. You can get rid of the Frozen ride if you want.
Yeah.
I don't think you can have a World Showcase without American Adventure.
Yeah.
That's my. I mean, if there was.
They can IP it up.
If they got rid of all the attractions in World Showcase, except one, that one would be American Adventure. That's my thought.
I don't think you can IP the American Adventure. I think
Sure they could. Hey,
I think there's even executives that would take
Will Rogers
exemption
into
to
a
that.
Pocahontas animatronic, and you could.
I just think there's even executives that be like, I don't know.
If you have live action versions of all the Disney films, then you could have live action Pocahontas in there in the montage, and you could have Mark Zuckerberg could pay $8 a month to have the blue check mark in the film and stuff like that.
That's Elon Musk.
Whatever.
You're getting your terrible people confused.
Imagine if you could pay $8 a month to have your picture
But I
in the
can.
montage.
Oh yeah.
I mean, you can.
It'd be like the magic, the memories in you.
You can pay money. That was free.
Yeah.
It was free.
You can pay money to have your picture on the wall at Universal. You could pay money to have your picture in a little postage stamp sized square in Epcot.
Yeah.
Now it's outside of EPCOT, but I'm still there.
Wasn't there there was a digital castle at Magic Kingdom you could pay to be on? The photo pass thing? That was a thing recently.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A digital castle?
Yeah, it's like in the app.
Yeah.
Oh, in the app.
Yeah. It's not real.
Okay.
You just pay to have to own like a square of a digital version of Cinderella Castle.
Well, that's like an NFT then.
Basically.
Well, that's stupid.
Yeah, in a way.
My kids were in the Magic Memories and You. One of our pictures was on
You knew they were in it?
I was watching.
And you saw it? Because it was hard to see
was.
what half the photos were.
It was, but I saw it. Yep.
Anyway, we're getting way off track considering we're talking about
That's
the
all right.
magic, the memories, and you.
We're trying to kill
So
7
with
more
that,
minutes yet.
With that, you can take it away, McFly.